Marvel, I went a little ahead in time by traveling. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, Collecting the Mother Box. Next, after losing his battle axe and Superman joining him, Steppenwolf became the one who was beaten by everyone. Bang, bang, bang. Steppenwolf was beaten so hard that he had no power to fight back. Even one of the horns on his head was cut off by Superman's heat vision. Barry, I'm connected to the mother box. I need electricity to get in. Cyborg shouted to Barry, hurry up, the mother box is about to complete the fusion. At this time, a space wave appeared behind Superman again. Seeing the situation on the opposite side, Diana and others instantly took a combat posture. Because the opposite side of the space channel was Steppenwolf's master, the Dark Lord Darkseid. He's coming. Steppenwolf, lying on the ground, said after sensing Darkseid's breath. I'm coming. In an instant, Barry touched Cyborg's shoulder with a huge energy. Cyborg used his strength to control his ability and rushed towards the mother box. The mother box that was about to merge together immediately had a tendency to separate. Cyborg transformed into two arms again and began to try to separate the mother box. In fact, the moment George branded the spirit body of the mother box, George was already able to control the fusion of the mother box, but George obviously could not reveal that he could control the mother box. Superman. Cyborg shouted immediately. For such a thing that only requires strength, it is right to call Superman. In the end, under the combined efforts of Cyborg and Superman, the three mother boxes were completely separated again and scattered on the ground. Steppenwolf stood up and looked at Superman and roared, but at this time one of his horns was completely cut off, and the living armor on his body only covered his lower body, looking extremely miserable. Aquaman stood behind Steppenwolf, saw the opportunity, and directly picked up Steppenwolf with a sea fork. Superman flew over and punched hard, and then knocked Steppenwolf into the space channel. When passing by Diana, Diana used the force to pick it up high and cut Steppenwolf's neck with a sword. The head and body of Steppenwolf rolled and fell on the other side of the space channel. The head rolled down and fell at the feet of Darkseid and was crushed by Darkseid. Steppenwolf, the right-hand man of the Dark Lord and one of the new gods, has lost his life since then. The angry Darkseid looked at the head under his feet and then looked up at the heroes gathered on the other side of the space channel. A tense atmosphere began to spread. Darkseid's eyes began to turn orange, and at this moment, the space channel that lost the support of the mother box was instantly closed. Seeing the space channel closed, the Justice League was instantly relieved. George knew that, since Darkseid already knew that the anti-equation appeared on the Earth, he would definitely not give up, and there would definitely be another war in the near future. Everyone sent the mother box back to each race, and the one of the human race was collected by Bruce. As for the location of the collection, he did not tell anyone. George did not participate in their arrangements, but left the crowd directly under the name of travel. Half a month later, George looked at the empty space in front of him, connected the three mother boxes with his mind, found the correct position, and used his space ability to move the three mother boxes directly in front of him. In order to prevent tracking, George controlled the three mother boxes with his mind and walked into the chaotic space together. After entering the space, George first controlled the three mother boxes to begin to merge. After merging into one, a throbbing sound came from the depths of the space. George let go of his hand and let the mother box float high into the sky, wrapped in the energy ball. Electric light scattered in the energy ball, and the chaotic energy accumulated in the sky continued to converge in the direction of the mother box. George's consciousness followed the energy and began to enter the mother box. The consciousness in the mother box turned into steel bones and begged George, please let me go, master. Using the mother box to control is just a tool. After being absorbed by the chaotic space, it is equivalent to George himself having this ability. There is an essential difference between the two. George will certainly make the most favorable choice for himself. Give up resistance and completely merge with me, George said to the consciousness in front of him. After saying that, George exited the mother box, allowing the space to plunder the power of rules on the mother box. George exited the space and returned to the real space. At this time, the phone rang, and he picked it up and saw that it was Bruce's call. After answering, George asked, "What's the matter, Bruce?" The mother box disappeared. Bruce said, "When?" George asked, pretending to be ignorant. "Half an hour ago." Bruce replied, "Wait for me, I'll be here soon," George said. Sensing that Bruce was still in the Batcave, George teleported directly. After seeing Bruce, George asked, "You said the mother box was lost. Is it the one you are guarding that was lost, or are all the mother boxes lost?" "All the mother boxes were lost. When we were about to send the mother boxes back, we established a connection mechanism in 3 places to prevent the previous situation from happening again. But just now, the 3 mother boxes disappeared at the same time." Bruce said, "Yes, the power of space this time is very weak. I didn't feel it at all." Diana, who came from Paradise Island, also appeared in the Batcave and said, "After a while, the Justice League gathered again in the Batcave to discuss the disappearance of the mother box. However, the discussion was fruitless, and the movement of the mother box could not be monitored by technology. In the end, there was no choice but to wait for something to happen before making preparations." When everyone was about to disperse, George called Aquaman and said, "Arthur, wait a minute." "What's wrong, George?" Aquaman stopped and turned back to ask, "Nothing, I'm just curious about Atlantis. I don't know if I'll be lucky enough to visit it," George said with a smile. "Ordinary people can't, but if you say so, the Atlanteans will definitely welcome you. If anyone dares to object, I will definitely break his teeth. Come on, man." Arthur smiled and said loudly, "Oh, okay, let's go." George agreed with a smile. Underwater world, Atlantis. George only realized what the gap was after he came here. The underwater kingdom under Namor's rule was like the gap between a small mountain town and the capital of a country. Even after George rebuilt a new city, there was no natural atmosphere like Atlantis. During the tour, George kept collecting genetic specimens of various luminous plants, preparing to go back and cultivate them himself. After a day of playing in the underwater world, under the hostile eyes of Arthur's cousin, he left Atlantis with several tons of the 8th metal. These 8th metals were collected by Aquaman directly with George to the warehouse after George showed interest in the armor on them. In fact, this metal has another name, Amazon metal. Wonder Woman's bracelet is made of this material. The shock wave after the metals collide can make Superman's ears bleed, and hearing is unbearable. At the same time, it was used to cast Apollo's sun sword. This metal is mostly used by gods. They use it to create artifacts. At present, the characteristics of Amazon metal are most suitable for enchantment, and the upper limit of power should be determined by the power of enchantment. For the outside world, this metal is very precious, but for Atlantis and Paradise Island, it is nothing. They are not short of this metal. Please support if you have any tickets, and please click to collect if you pass by. Thank you. Chapter 177, Build Armor. DC World, SYNOPSIS Empire. There are many precious metals in this world, including the 8th metal obtained from Atlantis, the X metal used to make the mother box, and the Dionysus factor that George has been looking for a long time. In addition to these, the SYNOPSIS Empire also has a unique metal, the 9th metal. The 9th metal is also called N metal, which is a dark metal full of dark energy. The characteristics of N metal are to subvert all physical and magical rules. First of all, N metal has the ability to offset gravity, so people wearing N metal equipment can fly. In addition, N metal can enhance the user's strength, reduce energy damage, and speed up wound healing. The purest N metal can make the user immortal, fly, and have psychic vision. Hawkman was once healed by the N metal in his body after being detected as dead, and knocking with the 8th metal can awaken people who are in ruins. Most of the N metal is owned by the SYNOPSIS Empire. N metal gives the SYNOPSIS people powerful power. At the same time, N metal was also considered the symbol of Hawkman and Hawkgirl in the past. Famous equipment made of N metal include Hawkman and Hawkwoman's hammer, Steelman's hammer, Plasticman's eggshell, Shazam's power dagger, Dr. Fate's helmet, and Batman also has N metal brass knuckles to fight supernatural creatures. Unfortunately, the end metal of the Synagogue Empire is not sold to the outside world. Even George only got a palm-sized piece through Bruce's relationship. This time, George came to the Synagogue Empire in person, of course, not to rob a handful. George's current personality is a righteous person, and such things that damage his reputation must not be done in the main universe. Just 1 month after the mother box was lost, George felt the change in space. George immediately found a very hidden place, and then entered the space. As soon as George entered the space, an inexplicable energy enveloped George. Countless information began to pour into George's mind. Even with George's learning ability faster than a computer, his consciousness fell into the deepest part at this moment, and began to process external information. The changes brought about by the energy group are not just information. After being wrapped by the energy, George's body is also undergoing transformation from the most subtle point. George was only 17 centimeters tall after waking up, but he had been transformed by the heart-shaped grass and chaotic energy over the years, especially after integrating the Superman bloodline. His body size soared to 220 centimeters. Judging from his body size alone, he is definitely a strong and muscular man. 3 days later, the energy surrounding George began to slowly dissipate, and his eyes opened again. George slowly fell to the ground, and a smooth mirror appeared in front of George between his thoughts. This time George did not use any magic or space ability, but the mirror formed naturally between his thoughts. This is the molecular manipulation ability from the mother box. As long as George can fully understand something, George can generate it between his thoughts. Of course, matter cannot appear out of thin air, but is converted from other objects. A simple description is George looked at himself in the mirror at 185 centimeters. His figure is not an exaggerated muscular man, but just the right muscle latitude, perfectly shaped abdominal muscles, powerful arms, and broad and secure shoulders. He is completely a walking hormone. After flying back to the villa in space and putting on his clothes again, George looked at the Star Network room next to the laboratory. In the past, George controlled the Star Network because the underlying logic of the Star Network said to obey his orders. Now when George looked at the Star Network, he felt a kind of superior suppression. Moreover, George felt that he could control all electronic devices at will. The network in the space itself was under George's control, so he didn't feel anything when testing it. So George came to the outside world, and he found that, as long as he was willing, he could see another world from his own perspective, the digital world. Dr. Stone once commented on Cyborg, saying that in the world of 0 and 1, Cyborg was the absolute master. There was no firewall that could stop him, and there was no password that he couldn't crack. Everything was at his mercy, from power plant power grids to telecommunications equipment. Everyone's life was dominated by a complex digital network, and Cyborg could rule it all. Perhaps these words were correct before George merged the rules in the mother box. After that, the digital world ushered in its true king. Cyborg was just stimulated by a mother box to become a mechanical bioman, while George completely absorbed all the rules. There was an essential difference between the two. After experimenting with electronic control capabilities, George turned back to space. Tracing energy, controlling gravity, energy transfer, sensing danger and life, creating force fields, rearranging the molecular structure of matter, attracting or projecting powerful impact bursts, creating electronic networks, controlling the subject of mental state, communicating with other life forms through the subject, taking over and controlling unconscious and conscious machines. George tested all these abilities one by one, and there was no problem using them, except that he was not familiar with the skills. However, George did not test the mother box's sonic boom channel and its ability to survive in harsh environments. One is that the sonic boom channel is easy to attract other people's attention, and the other is to test the ability to maintain one's own life form in harsh environments. George has no habit of seeking abuse. After fusing with Superman's blood, George's survival ability is even more explosive. Another change in the body is that the double pupils that originally needed to be covered with colored contact lenses disappeared completely after this fusion. The ability did not disappear, but the eyes returned to their original color. After sorting out all the gains, George looked at a piece of metal the size of a human head wrapped in the energy ball, and a smile unconsciously appeared at the corner of his mouth. George felt that there was his biggest gain this time. X-metal. You know, X-metal is also called the 10th metal. It is full of the purest possibilities and can be used by the universe forger to create the universe. So George wants to evolve the space in the chaos orb from a small world to a large universe, and X-metal is undoubtedly a very good material. But for the time being, George does not have the conditions for evolution. Suppressing his excitement, George was ready to say hello to everyone in the Justice League and leave this world. Anyway, he had already gained a lot of benefits. Just as George was preparing to leave this world, George received a call from Bruce again. After arriving at the Batcave, George found that all the members of the Justice League had arrived. What's wrong, everyone? Is there any news about the mother box? George asked. No, George. Let Bruce tell you. We are all here to help. Barry said. Let me tell you, after we all left, I cleaned up Steppenwolf's lair again. Then I found some special metals. Now my physical fitness has surpassed that of ordinary humans, so I want to build a more powerful armor to face Darkseid, who will definitely come in the future. Bruce explained. Sorry, everyone, it's a little late today. I'm not feeling well, so I won't say more. There's one more chapter. Please feel free to recommend, vote, or bookmark. I don't want to beg for votes if I don't update on time. Chapter 178, Hellbat Armor. Building armor? George asked. Yes, that's right. Bruce replied. What kind of metal do we need to work on together? George asked in confusion. Here, everyone come and take a look. Bruce pointed to a laboratory table next to him and said. After everyone gathered around the laboratory table, Bruce lifted the red cloth covering the lid. A piece of metal the size of a briefcase was placed in the middle of the table, and George felt it carefully. It felt a bit like X-metal, but it was very rare, at most about 1 gram, and it was completely fused with another metal, so from the outside it was completely impossible to tell what metal it was. However, fortunately, George had X-metal, so he could only recognize this mixed metal after using his molecular ability. No wonder Bruce had to call everyone together. It was estimated that he himself had tried, and it was impossible to dissolve the metal in front of him. Now I have designed the shape of the armor, but I can't dissolve it. I can't even leave a scratch on its surface. Bruce explained. No problem, I can help enchant it, George said. Then I'll take this piece of metal to a star to shape it. I believe that with the temperature inside the sun, it should be possible to solve the problem of melting it, Clark said. Then I'll take the shaped parts to the coldest place in the deep sea for quenching and condensation. Aquaman glanced at Bruce and said. I'll bless the armor with the gods. Diana said as she looked at the metal on the lab table. I can make you a pair of boots that can run as fast as me. Barry said eagerly. The ability to make items was discovered by Barry when he found that the armor was damaged after the last battle and had no money to buy a new one, so he accidentally discovered it while using the Speed Force. He used to only use the Speed Force to speed up the healing of his wounds, but since then he can even repair his clothes for free. Perhaps this is Barry's most simple idea. Then let me take care of the electronic part. Cyborg stood up and said. Thank you, guys. Originally, there should have been a share of each of you in this metal, but now I can only compensate you from other places. Bruce said sincerely. You are too polite, Bruce. We are friends, aren't we? I believe you will not refuse us when we need your help. Diana said. Yes, Bruce, there is no need to talk about compensation. Your strength has increased, which is also a good thing for the team. When Darkseid attacks the Earth in the future, we need to gather all our strength. Superman said. Yes, and what we did is just a piece of cake for us. George patted Bruce on the shoulder and said. Well, if it can be exchanged for a big meal, I think we will be happy to accept it. Barry said. Yes, let's get started. Arthur said. Barry, bring your battle suit here. I will also enchant it for you, so that you won't be accidentally shot in the future. George said to Barry. Oh, great. Thank you, Mr. Wizard. You see, seriously, have you become more handsome again, and has your height changed? Barry said at this time. Everyone looked over at this time. Yes, a great enemy was eliminated, and the state of mind has made a breakthrough, so the strength has increased a little. The increase and changes you see are just external manifestations, which are nothing at all. George explained. The Justice League did not dwell on this topic. After all, everyone's strength is a very private issue. A month later, this set of armor designed by Bruce himself, Superman cast the shell in the star, Flash connected to the Speed Force, Cyborg was responsible for electronic engineering, Aquaman quenched and condensed in the deep sea, Wonder Woman was blessed by the gods in Olympus, and George performed the final enchantment was finally completed. This set of armor is a gift from everyone in the League to Bruce. Superman casts the shell on the star to give the armor superhuman strength and defense. Wonder Woman blesses the armor with the power of mental defense in Olympus. Steel Bone makes electronic engineering to have the most advanced electronic system. The boots made by Flash are linked to the Speed Force to give the armor the speed of the Speed Force. Aquaman quenches and condenses in the deep sea to improve the durability of the armor itself. George uses enchantment to condense the energy cloak to give the armor energy defense. The cloak can also be transformed, invisible, and fly. The key is that the armor also has the ability to break magic. Hellbat is not only controlled by the host. The built-in computer can make Hellbat do actions that Batman cannot complete. This set of armor has a certain amount of energy reserve. Once the energy is consumed, it will absorb the driver's will energy. Moreover, this set of armor can absorb any energy to replenish consumption, and can also absorb other energy to launch. According to Bruce's design, this set of armor can turn on the destroyer mode to freely transmit the energy in the armor to any place, such as condensing it on the fist for a critical hit. George also built a survival system specifically for this suit of armor. Once the energy of the entire suit of armor is consumed, a reserved program set by George in advance will be activated to teleport Bruce directly back to the Batcave. This mechanism was added by George at the end, and he didn't tell anyone. The magic circle set by George is connected to the energy core of the armor, plus the characteristics of absorbing and converting energy. It can be said that this suit of armor is absolutely armed to the teeth. According to Bruce, this suit of armor is to deal with the King from Hell and to send the enemy back to Hell, so the name of the armor is called Hellbat armor. After Bruce put on the armor, he had a sparring match with the heroes in the Justice League. He can already fight with Superman in hand-to-hand combat. You must know that before this, Bruce could only use kryptonite to deal with Superman. In the end, even George couldn't help but go down and practice with Bruce. Of course, most of the battles ended in a draw. The battle between Superman and Bruce was basically a fist-to-flesh fight, which was the most exciting. There is no point in Barry and Bruce chasing each other. Cyborg can't beat Bruce without electronic control, and he can't beat him with electronic control. The battle between George and Bruce is completely George's personal magic show. Of course, this is when George didn't use his full strength, otherwise Bruce couldn't break a portal. After several battles, everyone helped Bruce adapt to the latest armor. George also enchanted Barry's suit during this period. The functions are relatively simple. One is mental protection, and the other is passive defense. With these two passives, as long as the defense is not broken, Barry is safe. There is no feast that will never end. After the armor was completely completed, everyone enjoyed a big meal in Bruce's old house, and left there that night. George stood in the stratosphere, and looked at the ground under his feet, thinking silently, "Goodbye, friends. When we meet again, we are destined to no longer know each other, but when you need me, I will be back." Finally, he looked at the direction of the Batcave again, and George raised his head, and flew directly into space. Gone. Well, that's fine. We never really knew him. Bruce said silently as he looked at the images sent back by the satellite. Sorry again, everyone. Here is the second chapter. Chapter 179, another timeline. The far side of the moon. This is the closest place George could find that would not be easily explored. George opened the sonic boom channel and headed for an uninhabited planet with the same gravity coefficient as the Earth. There are many planets like this in the original records of the Mother Box. After arriving at the uninhabited planet, George began to run hard in a suitable area. Accelerate, accelerate, and continue to accelerate until the surrounding environment has long been blurred, and George began to see the things he had experienced before. The scene when he first arrived on this planet, then the scene when he flew away from the Earth. the scene of making the Hellbat armor with the Justice League, the scene of visiting Atlantis, until George saw the scene when he was walking on the streets of London. George broke through the illusion at this moment and opened his eyes again. George had returned to the moment when he first came to the DC universe. George gently fiddled in front of him with one hand, and the sky and the earth were densely covered with electromagnetic waves. Pulling a short section over and unfolding it with his mind, George directly received this electromagnetic wave. Policeman 3527 needs support. A shooting occurred at a London subway station, requesting support. After waving his hand to restore the electromagnetic wave to its original position, George blinked his eyes, and his eyes returned to normal. Next, George went directly to the moon. But this time George came invisibly, no one found him, and then he was quietly waiting, while receiving the baptism of the sun on the sunny side. Feeling the strengthening brought to his body by solar radiation, every bit of progress made George feel happy. In this way, George occasionally looked down at the development of events on Earth. Seeing Steppenwolf snatch the mother box on Paradise Island, seeing that the mother box of Atlantis was also lost, seeing that Bruce and others resurrected Superman. And then things changed. This time Lois did not arrive in time, and Superman left directly after a battle with several other heroes of the Justice League. Steppenwolf took the opportunity to seize the last mother box, and Cyborg's father Dr. Stone did not escape the fate of death this time. Steppenwolf completed the Trinity, the mother box was unified, the remote sonic channel was opened, and Darkseid led his Dark Army to the Earth. Then, in order to resist Darkseid's bloody rule, Diana died first. In order to show respect for this great female warrior, Darkseid also held a funeral for Diana. Next, Darkseid easily conquered Paradise Island and killed all the Amazon female warriors. He also went to Atlantis and killed Aquaman Arthur. Except for Princess Mera who escaped in time, the other Atlanteans were wiped out by Darkseid's army. After Darkseid's army evacuated, George followed and appeared in those two places. 30 tons of Amazon metal was the only thing George took away. After Darkseid killed these two tribes, he also avenged the hatred of the failure of the first expedition to the Earth. Then Darkseid began to send countless apocalypse demons and countless warships to start destroying humans on the Earth. When Darkseid came to the Earth for the first full year, the whole world had already been destroyed and devastated. George of the Senegan Empire obtained nearly 100 tons of N metal. As George scanned the entire mining area, he found that the entire mining area was actually a spaceship. According to the records of the mother box, the planet Thanagar in the universe also has this special metal, so it may be that a spaceship made of N metal from the planet Thanagar crashed into the Senegan Empire a long time ago. However, it is no longer important what the facts are. After the things here are dealt with, you can go to the planet Thanagar to take a look. Of course, before Darkseid destroyed the Earth, George visited all the famous museums in the world. George did not let go of all the artworks. Anyway, if they were left here, they would only be destroyed, so he might as well keep them for himself. As for gold, currency, etc., George did not collect them, because those things had lost their meaning to George. Until this day, all of Darkseid's space battleships took off and launched indiscriminate attacks on the ground. As the attack area increased, countless energy patterns appeared on the ground. Anti-life equation was George's first thought when he saw the pattern. Sure enough, there was a legend that the anti-life equation was engraved on the surface of the Earth. George just watched quietly in the mirror space, waiting at ease. 3 days later, the anti-life equation merged together to form a palm-sized sphere. At this moment, Darkseid raised the anti-life equation with one hand to accept the worship of all the Legion members. A palm stretched out from the void, and then this treasure that Darkseid cherished so much disappeared from Darkseid's palm. Who is it? Darkseid roared. Who stole his things in front of his eyes? Darkseid's eyes kept flashing with energy. Unfortunately, George's mirror space is not the space technology of this world at all, and there is no space fluctuation for him to track. Even if he could track it, George had already used his speed force to avoid that area far away while he was talking. On the back of the Earth, George looked at the thing in his hand that looked like a hydrangea. An indescribable force urged George to want to integrate it directly into his body. If George was just an ordinary person, He might have been deceived by it long ago. Unfortunately, George has the Chaos Orb, which is a treasure. This temptation can't affect George at all. Anti-life equation is anti-life equation equals loneliness plus alienation plus fear plus despair plus self-worth mockery condemnation misunderstanding x guilt x shame x failure x judgment n equals y where y equals hope and n equals folly love equals lies life equals death sclf equals dark side. The anti-life equation in the comics can also create an antimatter universe. But in fact, George discovered through observation that the anti-life equation is an incomplete soul law. Why is it incomplete? Because it can only control the dark side of the soul. Therefore, it will corrode and engulf everything it touches. When hearing this anti-life program, humans will lose their free will and be controlled by the user. This ability reminds George of the witch demon in hell, which will corrode and engulf everything it touches. George certainly would not directly integrate into this rule. After using magic to seal the anti-life equation, George returned directly to Earth. In an underground space in New York, Superman, Bruce, Martian Manhunter, Princess Mera, Cyborg, Joker, and Flashberry hid here. The space rippled slightly, and George walked out of the space after everyone noticed it. "Who are you?" Bruce asked, and the others were ready for battle. "Don't be nervous, guys, I'm from another timeline," George said. "How can I prove what you said?" Bruce asked. "This is simple," George said, and took out a small storage device and threw it to Cyborg. Cyborg just took it in his hand and projected it. The picture showed a happy clip of George resting during the last month of building the armor with the Justice League. It's not edited, the video is real. Cyborg has the most say in this regard. There is one more chapter. Chapter 180 Transaction. Of course, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. It actually has nothing to do with my coming this time. I just want to find Martian Manhunter. How about finding a place to talk? George looked at Martian Manhunter and said, "Don't go. He may want to defeat us one by one." Princess Mera said. George didn't even look at Princess Mera, but just looked at Martian Manhunter. "Well, I want to hear what you want to say," Martian Manhunter said. "Right here." George took Martian Manhunter to the corner and then waved his hand, and the two entered the mirror space. "Is this the subspace?" Martian Manhunter saw that he was clearly standing here, but others couldn't find him, so he asked. "Similar. It's not an ordinary subspace. It's complicated to talk about it. It's a kind of magic." George accepted it. Martian Manhunter reached out and touched the surrounding boundaries, then walked back to George and asked, "George, right. I don't know why you are looking for me. Trade. I want to make a deal with you," George said with a smile. "Oh, what kind of deal?" Martian Manhunter asked. "I want the life formula." George glanced at Martian Manhunter and then continued, "The trade is to restore the world to its previous state." "Impossible. Let's not talk about the life formula. Just restore the Earth to its original state. I don't believe you can do it," Martian Manhunter said. "Don't jump to conclusions. Do you know why Darkseid wants to invade the Earth?" George asked. "Because the anti-life formula is on the Earth," Martian Manhunter replied. Since George came to ask about the life formula, the incident about the anti-life formula would naturally not be a secret. So, Martian Manhunter directly gave the answer. "Yes, anti-life formula." George clapped his hands and laughed. "If there is no anti-life formula on the Earth, will Darkseid still come to the Earth?" "Unfortunately, the anti-life formula is on the Earth," Martian Manhunter said. "I mean if," George said. "That won't happen," Martian Manhunter said affirmatively. "This is also the truth. If there is no anti-life formula on the Earth, then such an inconspicuous planet will not be taken seriously by Darkseid, let alone come here in person." George glanced at the Martian Manhunter, and when he stretched out his hand, the anti-life equation appeared in his palm. "You mean this is the anti-life equation?" Martian Manhunter asked in disbelief. "Yes, you also have super hearing. You and Superman can listen carefully to what happened on Darkseid's side, and then we can continue to talk." After George finished speaking, the space in front of him was directly broken, and the two returned to the underground space. "Hey, where did you go?" Why can't we find it? Barry asked curiously. Unfortunately, George and Marty and Manhunter were in no mood to pay attention to him. Marty and Manhunter flashed out of the underground space, and George leisurely took out some supplies to treat everyone to a meal. Unfortunately, only Barry accepted George's kindness, and George didn't care about it. 10 minutes later, Marty and Manhunter came back and gave George a look and took the initiative to walk to the corner. George walked to the side, waved his hand, and the two were separated by the mirror space again. How about it? Now it can be confirmed. George asked. Is this how you snatched the anti-life equation from Darkseid? Marty and Manhunter asked. Yes, just like this. George walked to the side of the crowd. Others did not notice that the bottle of beer opened by Barry suddenly disappeared in front of everyone. In the mirror space, George shook the beer in his hand and said, "It's that simple." Then, he exhaled lightly on the beer, waited for the beer to be chilled, drank it in one gulp, and burped. After disassembling the bottle, George looked at the Marty and Hunter who was paying attention to him and asked, "Can you tell me the answer now? How can you guarantee that Darkseid will not come to Earth?" Marty and Hunter asked. "Because after I get the life equation, you can let Barry restore this timeline to the time when Steppenwolf invaded. I believe this should not be difficult." George said. "Yes, you can." Marty and Hunter said. "At that time, I will go back to the past with Barry. After killing Steppenwolf, I will take the initiative to go to Apocalypse to meet Darkseid." George said. "But no one can know the location of Apocalypse." Marty and Hunter said. "Yes, anyone who controls the mother box can know the location of Apocalypse." George said with a smile. "You mean you have already mastered the mother box?" Marty and Manhunter asked in surprise. "Yes. If you are worried, you can go back with me. But you are different from me. It is best not to see me after you go back, and of course Barry is the same." George explained. "In fact, sometimes time is not impossible to be played with, but it cannot be played with by some people. In simple terms, every time Barry uses the Speed Force to go back and change history, it will either cause the Flash refutation or directly create another timeline. But George is different. He is the only one in the universe. Because he is unique, it is impossible for two George bodies to appear at the same time. Therefore, even if George travels back, the George in the previous timeline will automatically merge with the George that appears later to ensure George's uniqueness. And the history that George changed has become unique because of George's existence, instead of a new timeline appearing again. "Okay, I'll go with you," Marty and Manhunter said. "Then the deal is established. Give me the equation of life," George said. George never worried that Marty and Manhunter would not inherit the life equation, because Darkseid first learned about the existence of the life equation from the Green Martian civilization, that is, the Mars Manhunter race. Because Martians have their own unique system of explanation for life, and this explanation can be presented through a perfect mathematical model, so in the eyes of Martians, life has a meaning of existence, and this mathematical model is called the life equation. "Okay, I can give it to you." Marty and Manhunter materialized a bright ball of light. After George got it, he felt the energy of light in it. The life equation actually exists in the mind of every intelligent life. It is the hope of life and the bright side of the law of the soul. "Thank you. Next, it's my turn to travel to the treaty," George said. The two returned to the outside world, and Marty and Manhunter explained the story to everyone. Then Bruce asked, "If you go back and change the world, all of us will disappear. I can understand. What will happen to Barry and Marty and Manhunter? They will also disappear the moment I stop Steppenwolf from going to Apocalypse." George replied. "Okay, I have no problem." Bruce asked, "I respect the choice of Marty and Manhunter." Superman said, "It's a little difficult for me to run with two people." Barry said, "Actually, if you want, I can take all of you back to have a look." George suddenly thought of something, so he interrupted Barry and said, "Chapter 181 Apocalypse. Modifying history is what countless people want to do. There are also countless people who fantasize about building a time machine, going back to the past, and making up for their regrets. The people in the underground space didn't believe George's words at first, but now George had to take them back together, which undoubtedly increased the credibility of his words. "So how do you take us back?" Bruce asked. "I will send you into a space later, and then as a proof, I will travel back to the previous time point with Barry. The rest of the things will be left to me, and you just need to watch," George said confidently. "I think it's feasible. If he changes the timeline, we will disappear. If it doesn't succeed, maybe that will be our second chance." Bruce said, "Everyone, please make a decision quickly. A large warship is approaching." George glanced at the distance and reminded. The heroes also noticed it and looked in the same direction. Several people looked at each other, and finally the Martian hunter said to George, "Okay, we decided to go back with you to witness it." George nodded, then waved his hand, and a portal appeared in the space in front of him. A living room can be seen opposite the portal. "Everyone, please wait here. You can enjoy all the supplies in the room at will," George said to everyone. Marty and Manhunter walked in first, and Bruce walked in last. He looked back at Barry but said nothing. After closing the space door, George sent them to a villa built by George in the space. George built many houses like this in the space, and there were artificial intelligences to manage them, so George didn't have to worry about them at ordinary times. Then he sealed the space around the villa, so that these people couldn't run around, and then George didn't care about them anymore. "Let's go, Barry." George patted the Flash and said, "Since Darkseid destroyed the Earth, these heroes have been hiding from each other every day. They all wear combat uniforms with them, so there is no need to change clothes." Barry nodded, activated the speed force and ran directly, and George followed him. At first, Barry was very dissatisfied when he saw George catching up, and continued to speed up, but after seeing George could keep up a few times, he got used to it, and began to run at his fastest speed. Until the time point they wanted to go to appeared in front of them, George followed Barry, and crossed in directly. Time goes back to when Superman just woke up. Because his consciousness has not yet fully awakened, he directly started an internal fight with the members of the Justice League at this point in time. Barry, who came back with George, was about to go up to help when he was directly pulled by George. The two went directly into the laboratory. George took a single mother box directly in his hand. Dr. Stone was sent far away by George using a portal to avoid being affected again. When Steppenwolf entered the laboratory, he saw a man in armor standing there waiting for him. "Hand over the mother box, and I can spare your life," Steppenwolf said, waving a battle axe. "I don't know what it means." George shook his head and said. Before Steppenwolf could react, he first put the mother box into the space, and then punched Steppenwolf in the face. Steppenwolf rushed out at an exaggerated speed, and landed on the square. George did not leave time for Steppenwolf, and continued to follow and continue to attack Steppenwolf. Although George's strength is not as terrifying as Superman's now, his energy storage must be much better than Superman. So when George released the thermal vision, Steppenwolf was also unable to resist. The Justice League, who were beaten badly by Superman, lay on one side of the square and watched Steppenwolf being beaten by the new stranger while discussing. "Do you know who that is over there?" Bruce asked, leaning against the car. I don't know him, but he seems to be using thermal vision. Is he also a Kryptonian?" Diana guessed. "Well, it's very likely," Aquaman said. "I can't find any information about him." The projection in front of Cyborg kept flashing and said. George heard that the few people who were beaten badly over there were still in the mood to chat, turned his head and smiled at them, and then transmitted the sound in the space. "Bruce, you guys were beaten badly before." Then George closed the sound transmission channel. As for how irritable they would be inside, it was not George's problem. George held Steppenwolf's head, greeted the heroes of the Justice League, and then teleported away directly. In Steppenwolf's lair, countless apocalypse demons were guarding the remaining two mother boxes. When George appeared on the platform, countless apocalypse demons rushed towards him. George released all the superheroes he brought back, and then calmly collected all the mother boxes, saying, "Okay, next, let's deal with these apocalypse demons first." Under the attack of George, Marty and Manhunter and Superman, it was only a matter of time to deal with the apocalypse demons. When the three could no longer find a living apocalypse demon, George said to everyone, "Everyone, let's stop here. You can wait here, or do something yourself. I'm going to find Darkseid. Believe me, that place is not suitable for you." So far, everyone still has not completely believed in themselves, which can be seen from their standing positions. However, George didn't care. George opened the sonic boom channel in front of everyone, and the Grim Army opposite the channel stood upright. Darkseid sat on the platform, and on the left and right were the other two right-hand men of the Dark Army, the kind grandmother and the priest Desert. When George appeared on the other side of the passage with Steppenwolf's head, Priest Desert turned his head and said to Darkseid, "Master, I said Steppenwolf would fail." When the sonic boom passage could accommodate George, George took a step to the other side. George stretched out his hand and threw Steppenwolf's head forward, and this time it rolled to Darkseid's feet again. Pa. Steppenwolf's head did not escape the fate of being crushed this time. Darkseid turned his head and looked at Priest Desert and said, "Yes, you said it. You said that this time someone personally delivered the mother box to me." Darkseid's eyes flashed red, and a Z-shaped energy beam hit George at a speed invisible to the naked eye. Is this the demeanor of the Dark Lord Darkseid? George felt a blue protective shield that was almost broken, and said with a smile. George could understand that Darkseid could guess that he was carrying the mother box. You know, no one except the new gods could know the specific location of Apocalypse. It is easy to guess that George must have used the power of the mother box to open the sonic boom channel. A pair of assassination teams quietly appeared around George. George pretended not to know, and then the moment these killers approached, an adamantium tang sword appeared in George's palm. In an instant, 6 killers carefully trained by kind grandmothers died at George's feet. In fact, George used the tang sword made of his own bones. It was only after gaining the control ability at the molecular level that George could transform the bone tang sword into an adamantium tang sword. This kind of transformation is not random, and George himself needs to have a very good understanding of the deformed metal. Can you give me a free recommendation ticket for the sake of Pighead's update while he is sick? Thank you. Chapter 182 Darkseid. George stood on the platform in the middle of the hall, with the headless body of the 6th Division lying at his feet, and casually shook off the bloodstains on the tang sword that did not exist at all. The silver-white tang sword slowly turned into bone white, and then George took it back into his body bit by bit. Darkseid, in addition to the mother box, I brought you another gift. Don't you want to see it? George asked. Then he saw Darkseid on the high chair waving his huge hand like a palm leaf fan, and the Dark Elites who were about to pick up the energy gun to attack George put down their weapons. Mera, who was at the other end of the sonic boom channel, heard George's words and rushed into the channel with a trident, but she was held down by the Martian hunter next to her. Wait a minute, Mera, take another look, Bruce said. But, Mera wanted to say something. Although George sensed the situation over there, he did not respond. He waved his hand and directly closed the sonic boom channel that had just been penetrated. George took out the hydrangea-shaped anti-life equation from the space. Bang! George and Darkseid instantly punched each other, and finally ended with George's flying push. In terms of strength, George lost. Although George also has superhuman blood, the fusion time is still too short, so it is understandable that he lacks strength. George put the anti-life equation into space with his backhand and saw a twisting red light suddenly blooming in Darkseid's eyes. George knew that this was another Omega Ray, but this time George did not use an energy barrier to intercept it. He wanted to try the destructive power of this energy. George first stretched out his right hand and condensed a special position in front of the Omega Ray, but unfortunately the position was directly penetrated by the ray. As one of the unique powers in this universe, the power level of Omega Ray is also very high. The next moment, the armor on George's hand was directly penetrated by it. When the Omega Ray hit George's palm, the energy absorption ability was activated in an instant. After leaving 2 bloody wounds on the palm of his hand, the Omega Ray was finally absorbed by George. Sure enough, there is still a gap between George and Darkseid in terms of strength and defense. However, George was not going to fight Darkseid to death, so the next moment, George appeared in the sky above Apocalypse. Darkseid certainly would not give up easily, and he flashed and chased him. In this way, the two chased each other across countless starfields. Of course, this was when George was deliberately hanging him. In fact, as long as George wanted, he could throw Darkseid far away at any time. Until a space-time crack appeared in front of him. This was the weak point of space recorded by the mother box. Even if a small spaceship enters this area, the best result is to be swept to an unknown corner by the space turbulence. George stood outside the space turbulence, looking at Darkseid, who was about to catch up, and said, "Do you want the anti-life equation? Then chase me." George turned and rushed into the space turbulence, not even giving Darkseid time to persuade him to surrender. No. Darkseid was furious and just wanted to rush in, but stopped when he got close. The next moment, Darkseid opened the space channel, and the priestess and the kind grandmother walked out of the space channel. Master. X2 Darkseid stretched out his hand to collect a breath of air out of thin air, and then handed it to the priestess. Find him. I want you to mobilize all your strength to find him. Remember, I want to live. Darkseid ordered. Yes, Master. Priestess said respectfully. Master, do you need to destroy the previous world? Asked the kind grandmother. No, it's just an insignificant world. When I get the anti-life equation, all life will surrender to me. Darkseid said. At the same time, after Darkseid gave up attacking the Earth, the people waiting for the result found that the people on the opposite side were slowly dissipating. He succeeded. Barry said. Yes, he didn't betray the Earth. Martian Hunter said with a smile. Goodbye, guys. It's my honor to meet you. It's our honor too. Finally, with a smile, everyone disappeared in the long river of time. On the other side, George stood in the mirror space and watched the priestess holding that breath in his hand, not nervous. Because he was about to leave this world, unless he could run to the Marvel world with a breath to find himself, it would be useless. In fact, the moment he stopped to wait for Darkseid, George had already transformed with his multiple clones. It was only the clones that rushed into the space turbulence before, and the main body had already hidden in the mirror space. Looking back, wait, Darkseid, when I come back again, I will let you experience the taste of failure. The Marvel real world, Goo Crossing. Although this time of traveling through the DC world is not the longest, it does involve the most plots. However, the benefits are also very great. The first is the anti-life equation and the life equation. As the two sides of the soul, good and evil, it is not right to absorb any of them directly, because that will change the essence of one's soul. George has a better way, which is to let his soul space absorb it. Since the combination of the two is the complete soul law, of course it is the safest to absorb them together with the Chaos Pearl. The moment George put the two hydrangea-like equations into the soul space, the two hydrangeas seemed to be attracted by something, and flew directly to the top of the space. Rotating with each other, the black and white of the anti-life equation and the life equation wanted to blend with each other. After the collision, there was grey dust, which continued to merge into the space barrier of the soul space. As for what the use is, George has not seen it yet, but he believes it must be a good change. When George completely masters the soul law of the DC world, then George will get the same status as Death and Eternity in the Marvel world when he goes to the DC world. A god who masters the complete soul law is the real horror. In addition to the equation, there are 3 unintegrated mother boxes, which are brought back from the second timeline. Absorb them in the same way, and keep the remaining X metal for later use. What's left are some precious metals. In addition to doing research on these metals, George plans to digest them for a while this time and build a suit for himself. However, the most important thing now is to return to Hogwarts Island and take his wife to have a good rest. Although the time out this time is not too long, Wu Ixin is the most tired. As for the others, let's talk about it after I recover. Anyway, time is on George's side. Chapter 2 is here. Please click on the free recommendation ticket. Thank you all. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 Eternals. After returning to the Marvel world, George originally planned to take Alice to space to visit the built moon base and Attilan. However, a report from Bucky on the country of Assen forced this plan to change. "Bucky, did you only find one?" George suddenly looked up and asked Bucky. "Only one was found, and it completely matches the target person you mentioned. As for the others, we haven't found them yet." Barry answered immediately after hearing George's question. "Yeah. As for some possible dangers on Earth, George sent people to look for them after his strength grew. Vampires and werewolves in Europe exist, but for the time being, they have not caused any trouble under the rules of camouflage. So even if George knew about the existence of these two races, he did not take the initiative to touch them. He asked Barry to investigate nothing else but the Eternals hidden among ordinary humans. Although George knew that these Eternals had parted ways a long time ago, they were still connected to each other. Therefore, as long as one of them can be found, the whereabouts of the other Eternals will not be a problem, and this is even less of a problem after George has the ability to trace energy. Originally, George only remembered one of the Eternals, who was hiding in the depths of the Amazon forest. However, this area is too large. There are 7 million square kilometers there, and the water network is dense, and the geographical environment is extremely complex. Even if George sent out super soldiers, it would be useless, because George remembered that the one hiding in the Amazon forest was created by the Celestials to target humans, and had the ability to control the mind. However, these are nothing to George, because he has robots. It's just that the area is really hard to find. Of course, that was before. In George's opinion, the most difficult to deal with should be Igorus, who has the same ability as Superman. He is quite powerful, and it is indeed difficult to face him head on. So although Barry was given the task of searching for this group of Eternals, George actually never took the initiative to ask or look for him himself. Now that George has become Superman, even Igorus is just a bigger sandbag. George remembers that this group of Eternals also has a spaceship, the Domo. Unfortunately, George didn't know where the spaceship was hidden. It was not easy to find a spaceship hidden underground in the vast Earth. Most of the Eternals tried their best to hide themselves, but there were exceptions, and the one Barry found was one of them. Kingo III, an Indian movie star, was discovered this time because he was too high profile. Someone once saw him lift a car with his bare hands, although it was later believed that he was drunk and talking nonsense. But it is true that he did not use a double when filming movies. Bucky recalled the information and continued. This time, when shooting a jumping shot, an accident occurred again. The safety rope suddenly broke, but in the end he himself had no problem. Bucky, make arrangements to reveal Kingo's matter to Hydra and let them go first. We can come out to clean up the mess when the time comes. George smiled. Understood. Bucky nodded. This Eternal clan was created 5,000 years ago on Earth. The supreme celestial being Erisum selected 10 Eternal clan people with superpowers from Olympia and sent them to Earth to resist the invasion of mutants. For thousands of years, the Eternals have been helping humans resist the invasion of mutants, but they cannot interfere with human development or intervene in their wars. Until the last batch of mutants was destroyed in 1521, the Eternals had differences on whether to continue to protect humans. They finally decided not to interact with humans and waited for Erisum to take them back to their home planet. In fact, the so-called Celestial Clan is just another powerful biological group on the alien planet. They created the universe and created planets with life just for their own reproduction. This is a problem of cosmic cycles. The birth of each Celestial Clan is actually a Big Bang. However, when a Celestial is born, he will place his seed into a planet with life in his universe. That planet is actually the breeding tank for the next generation of Celestials. The intelligent life on the planet is just the nutrients for the next generation of Celestials. As long as the population and nutrients on the planet are sufficient, the new generation of Celestials will break out of the shell. That is, God appears, but once the God appears, the planet will be completely destroyed. In order to ensure that each breeding tank planet can successfully give birth to the next generation of Celestials, that is, God appears, the earliest Celestials created the mutant race to fight against the native top predators on the breeding tank planet. In the setting of the Earth, It is like dinosaurs, or dragons, or all the monsters that have appeared in legends. To protect the intelligent life on the breeding tank planet, in the setting of the Earth, it is human beings. However, due to a design error, the mutant race became the top predator after destroying the top predators on the Earth. So the Celestials created the Eternal race to destroy the mutant race. So strictly speaking, the Eternals and mutants are all top-level robots created by the Celestials to protect their next generation. Unfortunately, the Earth is now used as such a breeding tank, but fortunately, the Earth's population has not yet reached the demand for gods. So, now, if George wants to have any ideas about the Celestials in the center of the Earth, the first thing he needs to deal with is his watchdogs. The Hydra in S.H.I.E.L.D. did not disappoint George. Although their strength in S.H.I.E.L.D. is still very weak, they are very good at taking advantage of the situation. Soon, George saw the pursuit of the Indian film star Jingo in the satellite monitoring. This Eternal who was unwilling to show his superpowers was also labeled as stealing valuables and selling out national interests. In 1896, after the first screening of the Lumiere brothers film in Mumbai, foreign producers continued to bring various new films to be screened in Mumbai and other major cities in India. These screenings sparked the interest of some Indians in filmmaking. Saturday used the performances of two wrestlers and the training of monkeys as materials to shoot the first two short films in India and was hailed as a pioneer of Indian films. Bollywood is another name for the popular film industry based in Mumbai, India. Indians replaced the initial H of Hollywood with the initial B of their country's film capital, Bombay, thus turning Hollywood into Bollywood. In the center of this movie city, a fierce one-on-many battle broke out, and the battle scene was more in line with the usual, exaggerated techniques of India. The people on the high-rise buildings on both sides were already familiar with the scene of overturning a car with one hand, and of course they were more familiar with the protagonist Jingo. Only the police on the other side of the battle were really confused. Chapter 184 Nothing more. Arsan, Mumbai, city center. The more crowded side is the police led by the chief of the Mumbai police station. The chief has the so-called conclusive evidence that can prove that the famous actor family, the Jingo family, is a thief family that sells out national interests. He immediately ordered his subordinates to carry weapons and equipment and prepared to lead the team himself and then show his face in front of the media. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. He himself did not understand how the arrest, which was originally a sure thing, turned into such a chaotic scene. On the other side, Jingo, a Bollywood star who was admired by thousands of people yesterday, never thought that he would become a wanted criminal after waking up. Because he has always remembered the words of Ajak, the leader of the Eternals, and never interfered with the natural development of mankind. Of course, his ability is limited, and he has no ability to interfere. In his team of 10 people, each person has his own unique ability. Except for a few strong people with outstanding combat effectiveness like Icarus, the combat effectiveness of most of the others has reached the level of super soldiers. For example, their leader Ajak, in addition to having the ability to heal, is simply vulnerable when facing his archenemy, the mutants. The reason why she can become a leader is probably related to her ability to communicate directly with the god Alisum. Although Jingo's own fighting ability is not as useless as Ajak, it can only be considered ordinary among the Eternals. He can overturn ordinary cars, and his running speed is only slightly faster than that of ordinary people. Although his endurance is stronger, his special ability is to be able to emit energy with both hands. This was still a very powerful skill thousands of years ago. In ancient times, relying on this ability, he could be king. But in modern times, it is too lame. He also needs to dodge a cannonball, and the responsible person can send him to the sky. Although he doesn't know how he became a wanted criminal and attracted so many policemen, the most important thing now is to escape. He doesn't want to become the first Eternal to be captured alive by humans, which is too embarrassing. So after rushing out of the encirclement, he has been using his agility to hide in the alleys of Mumbai. After dodging another wave of pursuit, Jingo walked out of the trash can carefully. He had made up his mind that, after escaping this pursuit, he would immediately find an opportunity to contact other tribesmen, and must find out who was framing him. Team 1, already in place. Team 2, also in place. Capture. Remember to capture them alive. The Winter Soldier in the channel ordered. Yes. So, when Jingo changed his face and got out of the alley, he found himself surrounded by more than a dozen combatants wearing suitable combat uniforms and special sealed helmets. Just as Jingo was about to activate his special ability, he felt a strong electric current. His neck was numb, and he instantly became dizzy, and then fell to the ground. The next moment, an ordinary van drove over, and all the personnel carried Jingo and quickly disappeared in the traffic. Although the physical fitness of the Eternals is not ordinary, the current arranged by Bucky is not something that ordinary people can bear. After lifting him into the car, he immediately used a special confinement bracelet to limit Jingo's ability. This bracelet was specially designed by George for supercriminals. It can not only isolate the energy of the prisoner, but also suppress the prisoner's physical fitness. Even after Thor put on the bracelet, he could not escape the fate that was arranged. Moreover, the entire bracelet is made of vibranium, and it is impossible to break free. After George saw Bucky and others, he took them to the moon base through teleportation equipment. George arranged an authority for Bucky, and this base became a transit station for Bucky and others to perform special tasks in the future. The teleportation equipment also needs to be distributed by Bucky. How to use it, how to formulate strategies, etc. require Bucky to arrange personnel to be familiar with it little by little. This will be arranged by Bucky and artificial intelligence, and George does not need to worry about it. George saw Jingo, who had woken up in the detention room of the moon base. In George's eyes, Jingo is just a robot with special energy installed. However, his energy core is very interesting, as if it is replenished from space all the time. "Who are you, and why do you want to arrest me?" Jingo asked in English. Seeing that George ignored him, he continued to ask, "You are not from Earth, right? According to the level of technology on Earth, such a building cannot be built. Are you Inhumans?" Having lived on Earth for thousands of years, they are very familiar with the extraordinary forces on Earth. "You Eternals are just like that." George, who had studied Jingo thoroughly, said with a smile. "Who are you? Why do you know about the Eternals? Is it you who made me wanted? Why do you want to arrest me?" When Jingo heard the word Eternals from George, it was obvious that the other party was really coming for him, so he asked loudly. Seeing Jingo, who was so emotional, George couldn't help but wonder if he had lived like a dog for thousands of years on Earth. He was thousands of years old, but he was still so easily excited. "Don't be excited, Mr. Jingo. I asked you to come here this time, just to get news from you about your companions. Of course, as long as you are willing to explain, I promise not to easily explore your memory," George said with a smile. "It is impossible for anyone not to be afraid of having his memory explored. Impossible. We haven't been in touch for a long time, and we don't know each other's location at all," Jingo said very righteously. "Although I know you are lying, I still admire your courage," George said with a smile. He waved at Jingo, and Jingo floated to George's side uncontrollably. George put his hand on Jingo's shoulder, and the ability to go back in time was activated. All of Jingo's past began to appear in front of George in reverse order. Because he was just a creation of the Celestials. Skipping useless information, George got all the information he wanted. Until the end, George also knew clearly how they were produced. George finally took out a cosmic energy core from Jingo's body, and Jingo instantly paralyzed like a machine with its battery unplugged. For this kind of cosmic energy used by the Celestials, George used energy tracing to sense it. The nearest and largest group appeared on the Earth. George knew that it should be the Celestials being hatched on the Earth. In addition, there were 9 much weaker energy groups, which should be the other members of the Eternals. In addition, there are some weaker energy points on the Earth. George guessed that those should be the mutants that have not been completely eliminated. However, judging from the size of their energy, there is indeed no comparison. No wonder they have been hiding and dare not come out. Chapter 185 ZHUK. In a dense rainforest, countless fully armed robots are rapidly advancing towards the depths of the jungle. Of the remaining 9 Eternals, George's first one to deal with is Zuke, who is hiding in the Amazon rainforest. There is no doubt that robots without self-thinking are naturally able to restrain Zuke, and George has already prepared a plan to deal with this. Moreover, once Zuke's ability to control his thoughts is restrained, his strength will be the bottom among all the Eternals. Dealing with Zuke first is also to prevent him from using humans on Earth as a threat after he reacts, and then George will be passive. As the images carried by the robot continue to advance, a wooden village appears in the camera. Obviously, that is where Zuke has been hiding for the past few centuries, a legendary place of wealth and tranquility, without sorrow and troubles. Gradually, some people appeared in the robot's sight. These people are all descendants of the Spaniards, Indians, and Aztecs in the Battle of Tenochtitlan in 1521. It's a pity that there were hundreds of thousands of people in the city at that time. So far, after more than 400 years of inheritance, there are less than 10,000 people left. The reason is very simple. As the ruler here, Zuke is not a real god. He has no other abilities, except using his ability to control human thinking. If it were the Eternal Clan Sahi, he would definitely do better than him. So for more than 200 years, these people controlled by him have been living a semi-primitive life of slash and burn farming, without decent medical care, and can only barely fill their stomachs with hard work. In this case, population reduction is a matter of course. So, perhaps in a few decades, this free country in Zuke's eyes will gradually disappear. Zuke's so-called protection is actually just playing with these humans. These villagers are just puppets in Zuke's hands, and they have no freedom at all. As more and more projections are brought by robots, the actual situation in the village is more reflected in George's sight. All the people, with numb smiles and mechanized work content, are just like a puppet show, without any sound of communication. As a human being, seeing his own kind being treated so cruelly, George's killing intent for Zuke has reached its peak at this moment. Stun it, attack, and kill them. If you encounter resistance, George ordered the artificial intelligence stun it directly. This time, George sent out nearly 50,000 robots, and there were countless small drones in the sky ready to control at any time. Facing these ordinary people, George had arranged for the robots to use anesthetic bullets to make them all unconscious. George would not add trouble to those who were controlled. For a person like Zuke, once it was discovered that the person behind him was soft-hearted, it would cause a lot of trouble. You know, Zuke had the idea of controlling all humans on the earth, so when facing such a madman, George generally pursued a one-shot kill. The robots caused a commotion the moment they entered the village. The armed robots and NS5 robots carrying anesthetic bullets recognized through the camera and shot after entering the village. These military robots, under the control of artificial intelligence, shot very accurately. Ordinary villagers had no power to fight back at all. As they continued to advance, there were robots specializing in transportation behind them, which would take away all the fainted villagers. With the attack of the robots, the village began to become chaotic, but soon it became quiet. Then, under the control of Zuke, a counterattack was launched. Unfortunately, under the control of artificial intelligence, robots are best suited to perform such tasks. As time passed, George was able to see the auditorium in the middle of the village through the camera carried by the robot. At this time, all the drones in the sky also started the scanning program, and George was also sensing at any time to prevent Zuke from escaping from other places. Hey, listen to the people outside. Stop the attack immediately, otherwise you will definitely regret your actions. Zuke's voice sounded at this time. How could George care about it? After the artificial intelligence attacked the last building, boom, an explosion suddenly sounded. It turned out that Zuke detonated the ammunition depot, where weapons were hidden. Zuke, a strong man of the Eternal Clan, had enslaved ordinary people for more than 400 years. He had long been accustomed to issuing orders from a high position. He never thought that one day he would encounter such an attack, so he might never have thought of the option of escaping. As for his so-called control of the people, there was no response at all. The one who commanded the battle was artificial intelligence, and George's order would only be the highest order. And according to calculations, more than 9,500 people have been rescued. Even if there are omissions, there will not be many. Starnet started indiscriminate shooting until all 4 wooden buildings in the center of the village collapsed, and then stopped firing. Then the robots started cleaning up the battlefield. When the last building was cleared, Zuke, covered in blood and dying, was pulled out from under a pile of wood. George instantly came to the opposite side of Zook. Zook, who was dying, wanted to use his ability, but unfortunately he met George, and his proud mind control did not work this time. George extracted the cosmic energy from him with a wave of his hand. George did not waste a second facing such a person. The body was taken back to the moon base by the robot, and George could slowly disassemble it when he had time. Watching the robot clean up all the remaining battlefields and find more than 20 villagers from the cellar and then take them all away in the teleportation, George finally left here, and after controlling gravity to completely destroy the surrounding environment, George also returned to the moon base. Next, a mountainous area in Iraq. Bucky led 3 teams with a total of 30 members. All team members took out a 30cm short stick from their waists the moment they appeared. With a twist of his hands, the short stick instantly turned into a 2-meter long stick. All the team members inserted the long stick into the ground with force, and then activated the button on it. A red field was instantly generated, covering an area of 2,000 meters. 10 minutes later, Barry led 10 team members under the guidance of Starnet, passed through a phantom stone, and entered a cave. Then dragged out an unconscious woman, the owner of the Eternal Super Speed, Macquarie. George was the most qualified to deal with simple speedsters like her. The simple gravity field generator instantly beat Macquarie, who relied on super speed, back to her original form. Then Bucky led the team members wearing special anti-gravity suits and easily detained the speedster. Then, under the transportation of a transport ship controlled by Wiki, the spaceship that led the Eternals to Earth more than 7,000 years ago was also moved to the moon. What awaited it was nothing but dismantling. Without making a sound, 3 Eternals had been captured by George. The next data transmitted to Bucky is a scientific researcher named Festus. He was originally a member of the Star Group's Scientific Research Institute, but left the laboratory after World War II. In fact, he is also a member of the Eternals, a top inventor, builder, and engineer. He can use cosmic energy to create various precision weapons or objects. There is one more chapter. Please vote for recommendation. Chapter 186. There is no right or wrong in the face of survival. Chicago, a civilian community. Ding dong. Hello, who are you looking for? Festus looked at a woman dressed as an urban beauty at the door and asked, hello, is this Mr. Festus? I'm Mary Antoinette from the logistics department of Star Group. I'm sorry to bother you this time, to give you a gift for the 45th anniversary of the company. Thank you for the contribution made by every employee of the company to the company. Miss Mary smiled formally, and then continued, please sign for it. Then she waved her hand, and immediately another employee took one of the many gifts seemingly at random, and handed it to Festus. Thank you very much. Festus took the gift box in his hand. Then Mary took out a ballpoint pen from her chest, and handed over a signature book, ready for Festus to sign. Festus did not doubt him, and directly reached out to take the ballpoint pen. But when he was about to press the refill, a huge electric current was instantly transmitted from the pen to his body. Seeing that Festus was about to fall, Mary instantly appeared beside him, and 2 silver white bracelets were instantly put on Festus' hands. Then the car drove over, and Mary threw Festus into the car with one hand. The van without a license plate quickly disappeared in this community. Mary and the male staff member were both members of the Special Operations Team. Festus himself had no combat power. As long as he was prevented from quickly transforming into energy weapons, he basically had no combat power, so this unexpected attack was the most suitable. London, England at night. A young woman took a half-grown child for a walk on the road. Soon there were fewer and fewer pedestrians on the road, and the 2 people who were walking soon discovered that something was wrong around them. These 2 people were Sahi and the elf from the Eternal Clan. Sahi had an ordinary life like humans. She could transform any material according to her wishes, and the elf had telepathy and could create illusions. Sahi had a deep connection with humans and was willing to help humans and promote the progress of human civilization, but the elf was determined to hatch the faction of the Celestial Clan. George would not leave his life to the mercy of others, so even if it was Sahi, George arrested her equally. Both of them seemed to have powerful abilities, transforming matter and forming illusions, but it was very easy to defeat them if they were targeted properly. Be careful, Sahi, the opponent is not simple, the elf said. Two teams of soldiers wearing black special combat uniforms blocked both ends of the intersection. The elf instantly activated his ability. On the 50-meter section of the road, there were no less than 40 pairs of Sahi and elves wandering around secretly. Unfortunately, these had no effect under the special spectral display of the special combat team members. Even thermal imaging was only one of the functions of this spectral glasses. Then the two special combat team members, one in front and one behind, activated the speed force and took advantage of Sahi's unpreparedness to leave a deep wound on her leg. The elf was even simpler. In terms of combat power, he was not as good as the special combat team members who were injected with super soldier serum and was easily subdued. The two Eternal members quickly disappeared completely on this street. The super soldier who used the teleportation bracelet appeared like a ghost, magically appearing and disappearing. At the same time, in a Gobi desert in Australia, the winter soldier appeared here with 10 special forces. What makes these 10 special forces different from other ordinary members is that the combat suits they wear are all exoskeleton armor made of original adamantium alloy. This power armor from Starship Troopers is divided into two parts, inner suit and power suit. The inner suit is a muscle suit that provides additional muscle strength. This suit is worn inside the power suit. The main power suit is armor worn outside and is powered by a special battery. In addition to ensuring the flexibility of the team members, this power suit also provides many weapon pendants for the combat team members to choose from, including a set of Predator MK second vehicles, which provides huge vitality support for the soldiers. However, today, these soldiers did not carry too many high-tech weapons except for conventional weapons. Of course, teammates who can be teleported at any time are also the source of their confidence. When the 11 soldiers stood opposite the Eternals Sana and Gilgamesh, both sides knew that a battle was inevitable. Saint Na of the Eternals is a brave female warrior of the Eternals. She can transform energy into weapons and possesses extraordinary combat power. However, because her memory has not been cleaned, she has been infected with the Eternal Devil disease. She will lose her self-awareness at any time and attack anyone around her. Gilgamesh is the second most powerful among the 10 Eternals, second only to Icarus. He has super strong power, a strong body and agile skills. Buggy automatically confronted Gilgamesh, and Saint Na was in charge of the other 10 super warriors. The battle was about to break out. Buggy and Gilgamesh first punched each other. Although Gilgamesh had a slight advantage in strength, with the addition of the kinetic armor, Buggy's combat power was not inferior to Gilgamesh. Is this all the Eternals are? Buggy said. Boy, although I don't know where you know the existence of the Eternals, you have provoked the wrong person. I will pull you out of that tortoise shell and let you experience what a fist is. Gilgamesh said with an energy fist shield on his fist. Then both sides set up their fighting postures. However, after the real fight, Gilgamesh realized that everything was not simple. There was indeed a reason why the other party challenged him. The other party has been using various evasive actions. Although Gilgamesh is very powerful and has a fast reaction speed, he just can't hit the other party. Instead, the other party can always go around his blind spot and hit him hard. Even though Gilgamesh has excellent physical fitness, he can't withstand continuous damage. This is Gilgamesh. If it were any other Eternal, he would probably be killed on the spot by the man in front of him. Of course, George had already told Buggy about Gilgamesh's fighting characteristics before, so Buggy used his speed advantage to continuously roam and attack. Otherwise, if he rashly attacked the other party directly, even if he was wearing a power armor, Buggy was worried that the armor would not be able to withstand the continuous pressure after a long time. Although as a creation of the gods, the Eternals have extraordinary bodies, they are not really going to win or lose with Gilgamesh today. Taking advantage of Gilgamesh's gradual loss of patience, Buggy took out a set of vibranium chains specially customized for him. Then, in the process of fighting with Gilgamesh, he put 4 lassos on Gilgamesh's hands and feet. Soon, Gilgamesh knelt on the ground, his hands and feet bound together by the vibranium chains. On the other side, Saint Na's battle with 10 special forces ended early. Although Saint Na's attack was sharp, under the protection of a full set of original adamantium power armor, it could not hurt the members inside. Her strength was not as strong as Gilgamesh, so she was quickly subdued by the special forces using brute force, and was accompanied by a restrictive bracelet. Chapter 187 Death. South Dakota, United States, is located in the transition zone between the Midwest and the Rocky Mountains of the United States. The east is grassland, the west is rolling plateau, and it has a temperate continental climate. Who would have thought that the leader of the Eternals, Ajax, who is like a mother of the Eternals, lives in seclusion here? As the wise man and spiritual leader of the Eternals, Ajax can use his own energy to heal humans and eternal warriors, and can communicate with the Celestials. George saw Ajax riding a tall horse and galloping on the grassland from a distance, free and comfortable. "It's beautiful here." George looked at the vast grassland and said, "Yes, it's very beautiful here." Ajax looked at the endless grassland and said, "It's a pity that even such a beautiful place still has people who want to destroy it." George glanced at Ajax and said, "Are you from Asgard?" Ajax asked. "No, I'm just an ordinary earthling." George smiled and said, "Ordinary earthlings won't come to me, young man." Ajax glanced at George and continued, "A long time ago, I began to travel on the earth. I have seen human greed, cunning and killing, and I have also seen human laughter and love. I have seen their creations and dreams. This planet and these people are really magical. Yes, cunning and deception, honesty, and friendship, they are all them and none of them." George said, "I think the humans on this planet have the right to choose what kind of future they want. Although I don't know where you got this information from, what I want to say is that the fate of this planet has been determined, and no one can resist it." "I can't, and neither can you," Ajax said. "Who knows? If you don't try, who can be sure that it won't work?" George imprisoned Ajax the moment he finished speaking. Gently waving his hand, a ball formed by cosmic energy floated out of Ajax's body. "I want to invite you to a place. For you, it's just another reincarnation. I believe you are used to it." George took out a pair of bracelets and put them on Ajax's hands. A portal opened, and Ajax was sent directly to the lunar base by George. 9 of the 10 Eternals had been captured or killed by George, including Ajax, Jingo, Cersei, the Elf, Saint Nap, Gilgamesh, Macquarie, Phaestus, and Zeuk. Now there was only one person left, and he was also the one with the highest combat power, Igoris. George opened another portal, and across from it was a desolate Gobi desert. Unlike other Eternals who were either biased towards humans or concerned about their partners, Igoris only had their creator, the god Alisum, in his heart. "Who are you?" a high-handed voice sounded. If Jingo showed indifference to humans, this voice contained complete contempt. "Igoris." George looked up at the person floating in the air and said, "You know me." Igoris said, "I'm not used to looking up at others, so come down." Just as George finished speaking, the gravity around him increased several times. Boom. Igoris was caught off guard by the sudden change in gravity and fell to the ground. "You're looking for death." A furious voice sounded. Then 2 bright rays shot out from the dust, raised by Igoris' fall. The rays emitted by this kind of cosmic energy are much worse than Darkseid's Omega rays. George easily caught them with his hands. Igoris has a strong adaptability and quickly adapted to this piece of gravity. Then he flew up from the place where he fell and rushed straight towards George. George stood by Igoris without dodging, but when he was about to approach, he suddenly increased the gravity around him. "Since you are used to 5 times gravity, what about 10 times? Pa." Igoris fell straight at George's feet. "It's much better now." George looked at the dusty Igoris and said with a smile. He took out the bracelet and anklet, put them all on Igoris, and George opened a portal and threw him in directly. The soldiers have not been completely eliminated yet. Alaska, United States. George came to a frozen lake. A frozen cave was melted by the use of thermal vision. George walked into the cave, which looked quite large. In the deepest part of the cave, 5 abnormal races were frozen here. After using thermal vision to release the abnormal races, George used the transformed long knife to cleanly eliminate the last 5 abnormal races on the earth. After collecting the bodies of the abnormal races, George went back to the moon base. In one of the circular transparent prisons, George saw all the captured Eternals. "Everyone, I believe that you have communicated before I came. George said in the middle, "You have helped Odin deal with the frost giants, and you have also promoted the progress of society. I don't deny this." George glanced at Ajak, who was bowing his head, and then said, "But, I'm very sorry. The position between you and me is destined. It is impossible for us to live in peace." "Why, sir?" he asked. "This is determined by your mission to come to Earth." George looked at the injured Sahi and replied, "Our mission is to deal with the deviants. What does this have to do with humans?" "Sir," he asked, "I'm sorry, you've all been deceived." George replied with a smile, "In fact, your mission is to realize the God's manifestation. Once the God's manifestation is completed, the current Earth will no longer exist. So, it seems that this time we are born to stand on opposite sides." Festus looked at George and asked, "Can you stop the so-called God's manifestation by killing us?" "I don't know, but I will try my best. Although I don't know why Odin didn't come forward to stop you, and the Ancient One also treated you as non-existent, but I'm sorry, I'm not them." George's words also made the Eternals, who knew the truth for the first time, silent. They all turned their eyes to their leader Ajak. But Ajak just lowered his head, and after a long time, he raised his head and said, "Maybe you are right. Maybe there is still a chance. It's just that I have never had the courage to try. You are braver than us, Earthling. Thank you. Goodbye, all the Eternal Warriors. Thank you for your contribution to the Earth." George bowed slightly to everyone, and then stretched out his hand, and the cosmic energy cores of everyone's bodies and their memories all floated around George. There is one more chapter. Chapter 188, First Encounter with the Gods. As the creations of the god Erism, the 10 of them are actually no different from robots. Cosmic energy is the energy core, and memory can also be extracted and backed up at will. George's means of extracting energy cores and memories are also the means obtained by analyzing the golden fruit. Playing with the communication beads in his hand, George is not too worried about the god Erism. First of all, the Earth is just one of the breeding tanks. It is not without the possibility of failure. In other timelines, the Earth has had the fate of countless destruction. For example, the Earth was broken into two halves by the shockwave girl Daisy, or was completely swallowed by the planet Devourer, swallowed by the Dark Latitude, and so on. At that time, the god Erism did not appear to stop the destruction of the Earth. It can be seen that, if someone stops the god from appearing, the gods will only think that the rules are like this. This is also the reason why George dared to come out to stop the god appearance. As for why Odin and Ancient One did not come forward to stop the god from appearing, it is not difficult to understand. First of all, Odin had already predicted the twilight of the gods. When the god appears, Asgard would no longer be there. Would Odin still care about the Earth's problems? Obviously, it is impossible. Secondly, Ancient One had already arranged a retirement life for herself. She had given up everything on Earth. So naturally the next supreme sorcerer would worry about it. Moreover, the celestial god was also a subordinate of the great god of the universe, Eternity. She would accompany Eternity after her death, so why would she offend her future colleagues? Therefore, she turned a blind eye to the appearance of the god. Besides, perhaps in the world she saw, the next supreme sorcerer could solve this problem very well, but George intervened in advance. However, even if it happened again, George would still take action. As he said, he didn't like to leave his fate to others to decide. Things were not over here. Of course, George could wait a few decades to deal with it, but George was obviously not a person who would sit and wait for death. West African Sea, Canary Islands. George came directly to the place closest to the appearance of the god in later generations. Floating on the sea, George saw the celestial god Shiamu, who was hugging a bull, and was thousands of meters in size, 1,000 meters underground. George entered this underground space by teleportation. Since it was not yet the time for the celestial god Shiamu to be born, he was not very huge at this time. Of course, this is compared with other gods. A huge humanoid creature wrapped in dark red metal armor stayed there quietly. George knew that, although the other party seemed unconscious, in fact, he was really observing the operation of things on the Earth all the time. George carefully extended his spirit, and was pulled into a temple the moment he touched the god Shiamu. In this temple, Shiamu sat cross-legged with countless books in front of him. "Hello, George. The god Shimu greeted first. "Hello, Shimu." George also responded. "From the inherited memory, gods like you should not appear in this modern time and space," Shimu said. "Can you see the path I'm taking?" George said curiously. "There are many traces of laws on your body, the laws of space, the laws of time, and the laws of the soul, which are very interesting. Although your understanding of each law is not deep, it does not affect your use of the law." Shimu tilted his head, as if thinking about something. "Do you have any good suggestions?" George asked. "No, the laws of this world have already been determined, and everyone has his own place. But for those who pursue omniscience and omnipotence like you, I have only heard of the 5 great gods of creation. Even they only mastered a complete law, and this single universe cannot withstand your power." Shimu said. "That's right, so I didn't force any law to merge. Thank you for your advice, Shimu. Then you must know the purpose of my visit this time, right?" George asked. "Yes, it should be 48 years before I appear in the world. I'm very happy that you can stand up and stop my birth," Shimu said. "Since I have self-awareness, I have been observing the development of humans on this planet from my own perspective. For thousands of years, humans are like my children in my eyes. Although, according to the physiological age, the god Shimu in front of him is still an unborn egg, but in fact, he who has inherited the knowledge of the race certainly cannot treat the giant baby in front of him from an ordinary perspective. Shimu, we all still have a chance. Although I'm here to stop you from appearing on Earth, I'm not going to make you disappear completely. We can take other measures," George said. "Oh, is there any other way?" Shimu asked. "Although your divine body has not yet developed, your mind has matured, which I did not expect." George glanced at Shimu and then continued, "There is still a way. I can seal you temporarily, so you may need to sleep for a while. Then do it according to your method. My body can no longer support me to wait. It's nice to meet you, George. No matter what you want to do next, I will not resist. You can do it with confidence. I look forward to meeting you again." After hearing that George still had a way, Shimu stopped communicating with George, but sent George out of the spiritual world and let George do it. In the original timeline, Shimu, who had actually begun to appear as a god, actively cooperated with Cersei to complete the material transformation and achieve self-sealing. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Cersei and several Eternals to complete it with just one finger. George looked at the god who fell into self-sleep in front of him and felt fortunate. Now it seems that there is no irreconcilable contradiction between the two sides. Both want to protect the human beings on the earth, which makes the two sides have the conditions for cooperation. It was not very troublesome to handle a body of thousands of meters, and it was under the active cooperation of the god Shimu. George split into countless clones, and began to cast a shrinking spell on the huge body. This spell could only shrink Shimu by 1/10, and when he was gathered together, he was only hundreds of meters in size. Next, George directly opened the teleportation array to the ancient star. After arriving at satellite number 1, he directly cast the earth-shattering star to form a satellite with a diameter of 2000 meters and imprisoned Shimu in the center. George did not notice that when he took Shimu away from the earth, a deep gaze from Kamataj, the holy land of the earth, fell on the imprisoned Shimu through countless spaces. Because this gaze did not contain a trace of murderous intent, and it was still observing Shimu, it was normal for George not to notice it. Even if George found it, he would not care. As long as no traitor appeared to interfere with his plan, George would not care about anything else. George looked at the small satellite in space, and was not only glad for his choice, but this is not the end. Next, George plans to find an intelligent planet to settle Shimu down. Although he will grow slowly, it will not affect the birth of Shimu in the end. Chapter 189 Zhu Wenwu. A private plane modified from a C-17 Globemaster slowly landed at the largest airport in Bohemia City. "Boss, the fleet is ready, we can set off." Bucky knocked on the door and said. A few minutes later, George opened the door in neat clothes. "Let's go." When George and his friends got off the plane, Jerry, the head of the company's branch in Bohemia City, and his party were already waiting quietly next to the fleet. "Boss, you've had a hard journey," Jerry said respectfully. You don't have to follow me. Go back. I'm not here to inspect the company, so I don't need to accompany you," George said directly to Jerry. Although he was optimistic about the future prospects of Bohemia, George no longer asked about the specific matters of the company. George had already given a plan for the development here a long time ago. Whether it was land or industry, as long as it was implemented according to the plan, it would be a sure win business. And this time George had already made an appointment with someone, so it was not suitable to bring ordinary people with him. Yes, boss. Jerry must have already inquired about the character of his boss. Like his father, he didn't care about the company's affairs. Jerry led the company's senior management to quickly separate from George's convoy. "Bucky, has the other party made an appointment?" George asked. "Boss, we have made an appointment," Bucky replied. "But, boss, who is the other party that is worth your personal visit?" "A senior, an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. He is also the controller of the dark side of this land," George explained with a smile. "From the Ten Rings gang?" Bucky asked. "Yes, Zhu Wenwu from the Ten Rings gang," George affirmed. When George thought of Zhu Wenwu, he naturally thought of that pocket latitude, tarot. Of course, George was not interested in such a small latitude. George was more interested in the two dragons in it. However, it belonged to the territory of the Eastern Kingdom, which eventually made George give up the idea. As George thought about it, the convoy slowly entered the city. George could see high-rise buildings lined up one after another, and merchant ships on the sea kept coming and going. It was really lively. At that time, there were no ferries as big as those in later generations. A small passenger ship was the main means of transportation on the sea. Each ship was full of people coming and going. At this time, the streets of Zijinhe were lined with shops one after another. The roads were also very flat and clean. There were signs and advertisements everywhere, which was very prosperous. George knew that this place would be more prosperous in the future. The convoy quickly drove into the mountaintop mansion. Like many Zijinhe plots of land, this place was the property George bought many years ago. The next day, at noon, George met a middle-aged man with a refined temperament in a very famous local tea restaurant. The other party was none other than the target of George's trip, Zhu Wenwu, the leader of the Ten Rings gang. George was able to recognize the other party at a glance, not because the other party had a movie emperor face, but because of the energy faintly exposed in his hands. "Mr. Zhu Wenwu, I have heard of your name for a long time." George stretched out his hand and greeted the other party in fluent Cantonese. "Hello, Mr. George. I have long admired you, but I didn't expect that Mr. George could speak such fluent Cantonese." Zhu Wenwu smiled and stretched out his hand to shake George's hand. "I'm also very yearning for Oriental culture, so today I borrow your precious place to experience the morning tea culture here," George said with a smile. Today, both parties came alone without any men, because they are very confident in their own strength and are not afraid of any arrangements of the other party. Of course, in Zhu Wenwu's eyes, George is just a rich man. "I don't know why Mr. George specially asked me out this time. I believe that with the security strength of the Star Group, there should be no place where I need help, right?" Zhu Wenwu said after sitting down. "Mr. Zhu is a quick talking person, so I will get straight to the point." George smiled and said, "I want Mr. Zhu to join my underground council." "Your underground council?" Zhu Wenwu did not show anger or impatience, but asked calmly. "Yes, many years ago, I unified the underground forces of the entire United States. Then I formed an underground parliament to manage the entire underground order." George took a sip of tea and continued, "In recent years, the global economy has developed rapidly, and I plan to unify the underground forces." "I didn't expect Mr. George to have such a huge ambition." Zhu Wenwu laughed. "It's not an ambition, it's just a leisurely move," George replied. "It's a pity I have no interest in becoming the king, so I won't participate in Mr. George's plan," Zhu Wenwu said. "In the underground world of this world, the legend of the Ten Rings gang has been circulating for thousands of years. Although Zhu Wenwu has lost the desire to compete for power in the past 100 years, he will not join an underground force organization formed by his juniors. According to Zhu Wenwu's idea, if he wanted to unify the underground forces of the world, he could have easily achieved it hundreds of years ago, so why wait until now? Thank you very much, Mr. George's morning tea. I won't accompany Mr. George to enjoy it slowly. After saying that, Zhu Wenwu was about to stand up. Mr. Zhu, do you know that the 10 rings on your hands have been sending signals to the outside world? George said leisurely while holding up the teacup. Oh, I wonder if Mr. George has done research on my weapons. Zhu Wenwu sat down again and said, is Mr. George also a member of the supernatural world? Mr. Zhu, do you know a lot about the supernatural world? George asked. I have seen the 5 fingers that escaped from Kunlun, the werewolves and vampires in Europe, and several wizards in Southeast Asia. Of course, the ancient country in the east is a forbidden area, and I have not explored it. Zhu Wenwu listed them. There are many more. There is a group of underwater people who can live in the ocean, there is a group of aliens in space, and there is a group of magicians in Kamatage, but those do not have much contact with ordinary people. George also mentioned some supernatural forces. Then Mr. George still has the confidence to unify the underground forces? Zhu Wenwu asked. First of all, not all supernatural forces have a place in the underground world, and you underestimate me too much. Let's go. Since you want to recruit Mr. Zhu, I have to show some strength. George stood up and said. George first waved his hand to open a portal and brought Bucky over, then brought Zhu Wenwu and Bucky to the moon base. Unlike the 10 Rings gang, which only had Zhu Wenwu as a super soldier, every soldier he saw here was very skilled. It was also the first time that Zhu Wenwu saw so many super soldiers gathered together, and he was very interested in the strength these soldiers showed. How about it, Mr. Zhu? Do you want to try? George asked with a smile. There is one more chapter. Please recommend and collect. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190, Battle. It's better to obey than to be respectful. Then I'll show you my ugliness. Zhu Wenwu said as he shook his arms, and the 10 rings made a buzzing sound. Bucky, wearing an inner armor containing vibranium, stood opposite Zhu Wenwu. According to the information George gave him yesterday, the middle-aged man in front of him once gathered a brutal army and named it the 10 Rings Legion. He once led his legion to conquer countless large and small countries in the east, subverted many kingdoms in East Asia, Central Asia and parts of Europe today, and swept the world. His legendary stories are still recorded in many places. He himself is even more spread as a magical figure with infinite divine power and even immortality, so he is not in existence that he can despise. Boy, you'd better show your weapons, otherwise you will be defeated miserably. Zhu Wenwu said as he showed the 10 rings emitting blue light. I carry my weapons with me too. Bucky turned off the bionic system on his arm and said, revealing his metal arm. Then come on. Bang bang bang, several metal rings with blue light burst out as Zhu Wenwu rushed forward. Bucky kept blocking with both hands, and countless sparks burst out between him and the 10 rings. He took several steps back before he could block the attack of the 10 rings. George could see that at the moment when the 10 rings moved, the blue arcs carried by them also flowed into Zhu Wenwu's body, transforming his body all the time. This seemingly simple set of circular weapons is actually a set of high-tech equipment. George also saw the powerful position contained in it for the first time. Zhu Wenwu found them in the crater. The 10 rings were worn on Wenwu's wrist, giving him immortality, superhuman body and energy and other abilities. Bang bang bang, Bucky quickly took out his pistol with his extraordinary speed and completed the rapid shooting. You know, the United States has always advocated violence, and guns are a symbol of force. Until now, the United States has been holding various gun competitions. Bucky was originally a sharpshooter. After being injected with the super soldier serum, and with the blessing of the Speed Force, his reaction was far superior to that of ordinary super soldiers. He emptied the magazine in an instant. The 10 rings spun rapidly, forming a blue field around Zhu Wenwu's body, blocking all the bullets. Even so, Zhu Wenwu was also scared and sweating. If it weren't for the 10 rings automatically protecting the master, he might have been pierced by the bullet. You should know that the revolver that Bucky just took out is not an ordinary one. It is a special firearm with energy attack. After putting the gun back into the holster, the two sides fought again. The boxing and kicking skills of both sides are comparable, and there is no obvious gap. Although Zhu Wenwu can attack and defend with the 10 rings, Bucky's arms are also made of full vibranium. Even if some attacks hit his body, they are absorbed by the inner armor containing vibranium and bounced back. So after fighting for a long time, the two sides only fought half a catty and ate two without using the killing move. After a long time of attacking and failing, both sides realized that there was no point in fighting, so they stopped fighting. Mr. George, your men are so powerful. I wonder if they can learn from your tricks. Zhu Wenwu asked while standing still. Of course, I'm ready, George said while standing and holding his fist. Okay. Zhu Wenwu got ready to take George's punch. George saw what Zhu Wenwu meant, but did not dissuade him. Instead, he reminded him again, and shot at Zhu Wenwu like a cannonball. The distance was not far, and Zhu Wenwu did not want to dodge. He raised his hands to block the blow. Boom. The invisible shock wave generated by the head-on collision between the two sides swept wildly around, forming an air wave with a radius of hundreds of meters. The super soldiers who were closer all stepped back dozens of steps. Boom. In the end, Zhu Wenwu still failed to block the blow. He flew backwards and hit the wall behind him, leaving a dent on the metal wall. Fortunately, George held back, and Zhu Wenwu's 10 rings also had the function of automatically protecting the master, which protected Zhu Wenwu's whole body in time. Ugh. Zhu Wenwu spat out a mouthful of blood, and then slowly stood up. Sorry, I was so excited that I didn't hold back my hands. George apologized. It's okay, I feel much better after spitting out this mouthful of blood. Zhu Wenwu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, don't resist, I'll treat you. After George reminded him, a blue light shot out from his right hand, instantly submerging Zhu Wenwu's body. Zhu Wenwu only felt a warm energy flowing through his internal organs, and the trauma caused by the shock just now was almost healed in an instant. It's really amazing. I didn't expect that Mr. George is not only a rich man, but also the leader of the underground forces, and even his personal strength is so terrifying. Zhu Wenwu said, no, this world is very big, and there are still many things we don't know. Even on Earth, there are many secrets we haven't solved. George glanced at the 10 rings on Zhu Wenwu's hands and said, these 10 rings can be big or small, and they are also very magical. As George spoke, he took Zhu Wenwu to an observation deck at the base. Standing here to see the beauty of the Earth is refreshing. We are here, Zhu Wenwu said in surprise. On the moon, George replied with a smile. You mean we are on the moon now? Zhu Wenwu asked in surprise. Yes, and we are not alone. Look over there, there is an alien city called Attilan. George pointed to the distance and explained. It's really incredible, Zhu Wenwu said. So there are still many secrets in this world, and the Earthlings are not alone. There are countless people in the outside world who want to invade our planet. I want to unify the underground forces on the Earth in order to find some dangers. George changed the subject and said, for example, Zhu Wenwu asked, let's say, the Eternals. George waved his hand and took Zhu Wenwu to the place where the bodies of the Eternals were placed and said, the purpose of these aliens coming to the Earth is to hatch a giant in the middle of the Earth. Then I discovered it in advance and stopped it. For example, the 10 rings on your hand. Is there really a problem with the 10 rings on my hand? Zhu Wenwu asked. Yes, it is made with a very advanced technology. But I noticed that it is always transmitting its location information to the outside world. George said, can it be turned off? Zhu Wenwu asked. Of course, George nodded. Will it affect its use? Zhu Wenwu asked. No, simply put, it is like turning off a switch, and it will not affect the use of the weapon. Moreover, you have already communicated with the breath of this 10 ring, which is a bit like the recognition of the master by the Oriental artifact. George explained. Then, Zhu Wenwu thought for a while and said, then please help me turn off the signal. I don't want to be attracted to any uncontrollable danger. George took the 10 rings and started time reversal. He obtained the production process of the entire set of 10 rings. In addition to the materials, the rune power contained in it is the key to exerting the energy of the universe. In other words, the 10 rings have been passively absorbing the energy of the universe to strengthen Zhu Wenwu, which is the key to his longevity. George directly decomposed the 10 rings, modified one of the runes, and handed it back to Zhu Wenwu after restoration. Okay, it will not transmit messages to the outside world in the future. You can use it with confidence, George said with a smile. Chapter 191 Expansion. The communication with Zhu Wenwu was even simpler, and he no longer rejected George's invitation to join the Underground Council. Of course, whether he succumbed to force or was convinced by George, it didn't matter, as long as George's goal was achieved. The next thing was naturally handled by Bucky and Zhu Wenwu. The underground forces in Southeast Asia would definitely enter a short period of chaos, but the future would once again usher in a new order. This time, with George's intervention, even if Zhu Wenwu found Taro Village again, and met Yingli who was guarding Taro Village, he would not encounter the tragic ending of his previous life. More importantly, with Zhu Wenwu and Yingli around, their son's vision should not be deviated again. Of course, these are all later stories, and now the new order is established first. After opening the portal and returning to the tea restaurant, they enjoyed a good morning tea accompanied by Zhu Wenwu and Bucky, and then the two sides separated. That afternoon, George was drinking afternoon tea with his family when he heard the report from Wiki. Master, an unrecorded spacecraft was found in the space jump channel. Got it. This little broken ball is really popular, George said with a smile. Another alien? Alice asked, putting down her teacup. Well, it's not a big problem. He's just a playboy who likes to flirt with people everywhere, George said with a smile. Alice had seen aliens before, of course. She saw more corpses. Unlike when Marvel came to Earth before, George didn't find out in advance. This time, thanks to the advanced technology obtained in the previous worlds, a large number of detection devices have been deployed in the solar system in the past few years. Therefore, now once a spacecraft jumps out of the jump point, it will be captured by the detection devices hidden nearby. Of course, the detection methods used now are different from those in the Marvel world, so ordinary spacecraft will not realize that they have been detected in advance. Sure enough, not long after, George received a report of the latest news that the spacecraft landed in Colorado, USA. It was indeed him, Ego, who claimed to be a celestial being, but was actually a planet with consciousness in the universe. Ego has been wandering in the universe for a long time, and is very lonely. Ego, who has consciousness, originally planned to create his own kind, or his own clone, and use plants to invade other planets to expand his power, but he found that this process was very slow. After that, Ego planned to cultivate his own offspring, to conquer the universe with him. So now Ego should be spreading seeds throughout the universe, and then looking for suitable offspring to cultivate. George will not stop Ego's arrival, because George knows that the other party will not have any impact on the Earth. And this is just an avatar of Ego. Even if this avatar is destroyed, it will not have any effect on Ego. As for his offspring on Earth, the future Star-Lord, that is a matter for the future. Although in the setting of the comic world, Star-Lord's father, Ego of the Life Planet, is also a member of the Elders of the Universe, it is not certain whether Ego here is still so powerful. In the following period of time, George began to design a spaceship for himself. The overall material of the spaceship is vibranium, and it uses the super engine technology in the world of Starship Troopers. Here we have to say that the interstellar navigation method of the Marvel Universe is relatively special, mainly relying on wormhole jumps. Even a powerful empire like the Kree has not mastered the technology of superluminal flight. Of course, the wormholes here are all naturally formed, and the technology of artificial wormholes like the one in Predator has not been used in ordinary navigation. According to the star map George got from Marvel's Kree cruiser, the solar system, where the Earth is located, has only one space jump point, which is also the main reason why George can easily deploy defenses. In fact, the most powerful space engine technology George knows is the technology in the Star Wars world. Compared with the hyperspace flight speed of millions of times the speed of light in the Star Wars world, the superluminal engine of the Starship Troopers time is undoubtedly much inferior. Of course, the hyperspace engine in the Star Wars world is not without shortcomings. Excessive gravity can cause the hyperspace engine to be paralyzed and unstable. The engine of the Millennium Falcon often fails at critical moments, perhaps because of excessive modification. Then George imitated the 76-meter-long luxurious Naboo Royal Queen starship. Of course, this ship is now called Alice. Although this shining spaceship is only equipped with 2 sets of light energy weapon systems, it has a solid protective shield and a superluminal engine. The internal configuration is also very luxurious, which can give George a very good experience in the long interstellar journey. For George, who now has time and ability, it is not a big problem to take an interstellar journey. What George did not expect was that Alice, who was originally thought to be interested in interstellar travel, was not interested. All her thoughts are now on magic, and she does not have too much expectation for space travel. Therefore, after the entire spaceship was built, Alice only accompanied George on a circle in the solar system and returned to Hogwarts Island to continue practicing magic. This space journey can only be made by George himself. Wiki, set the route and go to the barren land. George ordered after returning to space. The destination of George's space journey is the Collector's mobile planet, the barren land, and the illegal trade distribution center in the universe. According to the star map, there is no space wormhole directly to the Collector planet around the Earth. You can only go through the only space wormhole, then go to the territory of the Kree Empire, and then go to the barren land. Soon, the spaceship entered the space jump point. After a trance, the spaceship soon appeared in another unfamiliar starry sky. George opened the porthole of the protective deck and looked at the beautiful starry sky outside. He couldn't help but sigh at the beautiful scenery of the universe. It's not that George has never seen the scenery of the universe. In the past few years, George has already visited the ancient star and the solar system. However, this is the first time George has traveled to other galaxies with a tourist mentality, so there is still some novelty. It's just that this novelty is just that, after seeing it too much, it gives people more of a feeling of loneliness. The spaceship with artificial intelligence automatic driving does not need George to manually control it. After losing interest in the beautiful scenery in space, George went straight into the bedroom to rest. Chapter 192 Encounter with the Raiders. Beep, 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 an alarm sounded in the empty spaceship. What's wrong, Wiki? George walked out of the room and asked. Master, there is a huge meteorite flow ahead. Please be prepared. Wiki reported. I thought it was something, just to test the strength of the spaceship. George said. In fact, George can open a space wormhole to avoid the meteorite flow, or open the energy shield to defend against the meteorite attack. However, George's spaceship uses vibranium, so the small meteorite flow is naturally not in George's eyes. Close the porthole. Prepare for the impact. 3, 2, 1. Wiki reported. A shaking came, and soon Wiki reported again. Smoothly past the meteorite flow, the paint on the outside of the spaceship is scratched, and no repair is needed for the time being. George heard that the paint on the spaceship was only scratched, and he also smiled with satisfaction. In the Marvel universe, there is such a group of people who call themselves thieves. Under normal circumstances, they will accept tasks issued by various forces in the universe. Then at certain times, they will transform into a group of interstellar pirates and do all kinds of evil. George didn't expect that the first ship he encountered would be a sweeper ship, but considering that the place where he was located belonged to the border of the Kree Empire, it was normal for a sweeper to appear here. Perhaps George's ship was too gorgeous and did not have too many weapon systems. Compared with the firepower of those sweepers, it looked very different from the outside. Do you want to do it, boss? Inside the sweeper ship, the purple-skinned humanoid creature looked at the luxurious Alice ship that appeared on the ship's screen and asked the tall blue-skinned man standing on the bridge in a deep voice. Hall, what kind of ship do you think this is? Gran, the blue-skinned sweeper boss, looked at his men with a playful look. The purple humanoid creature Hall blinked his almost invisible eyes and guessed, it's probably a modified ship for a noble to go out for fun. Yes, you have some vision. The other party's ship is so gorgeous, it must not be an ordinary cargo ship. Maybe it's a noble ship, or a ship of the Shire Empire. You know, there are no such nobles in the Kree Empire. Gran, the blue-skinned boss, said. But the Shire Empire is located in the Eagle's Nest of the Shire Galaxy. How could they come here? Another subordinate suddenly said. Who knows? Maybe they are just passing by. Hall said. Then should we take down this spaceship? Another subordinate asked. Of course, you have to know that a noble is very popular in the slave market. Even this spaceship looks extraordinary. Maybe it is enough for us to make a lot of money. A small spaceship is nothing in the eyes of the sweepers. If it behaves well, it's fine. If it doesn't obey, it will be directly blown up. The people in the spaceship can't even save their lives. I believe the people on the spaceship will know what to choose. Hearing the boss say this, more than a dozen men in the spaceship couldn't help but open their eyes wide, flashing greedy eyes. Boom, an energy cannon passed by the edge of George's spaceship. Although it did not cause any damage to the spaceship, it also formed a strong deterrent. Master, a strange signal has been received. Wiki reported. Oh, give a warning, and then talk about it. Interesting. Take it in. George smiled. Okay, Master. Wiki replied. This is Amor. I'm ordering you to shut down the engine immediately, otherwise you will bear all the consequences. A universal language came from the communicator. Okay, no problem. I'll make it happen. Please don't attack. George replied with a smile. Then George really ordered Wiki to shut down the engine and quietly float in space. Then the spaceship on the opposite side, which was about 10 times larger than George's spaceship, quickly appeared in front of Alice. A huge capture net was ejected and instantly covered George's Alice. Everything was so simple. When George did not make any attacking actions, Alice was so easily hunted by the sweeping spaceship. To be honest, George did not expect that he encountered a sweeping spaceship, but the appearance of another spaceship in the universe was a surprise to George, because from this spaceship, he could get the most valuable thing he wanted, universal credit points. Less than 10 minutes later, George was already standing on the bridge of the sweeper ship. In addition to the corpses lying on the ground, there were only a few sweepers kneeling on the ground in fear, not daring to raise their heads. George was not interested in pretending to be a pig and eating the tiger. When the Alice was pulled into the sweeper ship, the hatch of the Alice ship opened. In the blink of an eye, blood had spread throughout the sweeper ship. George originally did not intend to kill people. As long as they did not shoot at him, they could basically survive. Unfortunately, he was facing some vicious interstellar pirates. When they were ferocious, they would not think about anything. So in the end, all the enemies who pointed their guns at George were torn apart and no longer breathed. Only 3 or 5 pink-skinned humanoids who did not react survived on the entire ship. Judging from their appearance, they were clearly second-rate technicians. In addition to these pink-skinned humanoids, there was another person who survived. That person was the leader of this small raider team, the blue-skinned boss Gran. At this time, Gran's 2 arms had been cut off, and the wounds that originally sprayed blood were also frozen by a ball of frost. He stood there looking at George with resentment. Before, he was standing in the front, and George chose to attack him at the first time. Gran's reaction was the fastest. When he saw a man covered in silver armor walking down the spaceship, he subconsciously picked up the energy gun in his hand and shot George. However, before he pulled the trigger, one of his hands was completely cut off by a ray. The reason why he was spared was that from the position where he stood, it was judged that he was likely to be the leader of this raider team, so he bypassed him and killed other space pirates who had reacted and pulled out various firearms to kill George. However, even if one arm was broken, Grant still did not give up. He was cruel and took advantage of George's inattention, picked up another gun from the ground with his other hand, and then aimed at George and prepared to shoot. Chapter 193 Barren Land. Crack, a sound of a bone being twisted was heard. The boss of the sweeper, who had been in the universe for a long time, looked at his men behind him at a strange angle. The strong vitality made Gran like a stranded goldfish, and his mouth opened and closed subconsciously. The sound of the body falling to the ground was heard after a few seconds. "You are looking for death, so you can't blame me," George said, shaking his head. George looked at the pink-skinned humanoids on the side. In the horrified eyes of these pink-skinned humanoids, he opened his right hand, and a strong control force gushed out of George's hand. The randomly selected humanoid was hung in the air. "Can you tell me who you are now?" George asked. Hash and amp, asterisk and amp, and amp. The remaining humanoid said in horror. At this time, George suddenly came to his senses, patted his forehead and said, "I forgot to turn on the translator. I forgot that we don't speak the same language." Although George said so, his face did not show any embarrassment. It's a pity that the other party did not speak the language of the Kree Empire, otherwise there would be no need for a language translator. "Can you speak the Kree language?" George asked again using the language of the Kree Empire. "Yes, sir, we can," the humanoid creature answered nervously. As a hegemon in the universe, the Kree language is circulated in many places, so there is no obstacle for the two sides to communicate. "Very good," George nodded with a smile. "It's over. It's completely over." The remaining raiders were gloomy at this time. They knew that they had kicked the iron plate this time. Since there are still a few raiders left, George is not going to kill them all. Taking them to the barren land can also be regarded as an income. Let someone clean up the blood on the ground and throw the bodies away directly. By the way, take out all the property of those guys just now, and let me see it. George asked after the group of humanoids finished cleaning. A bunch of poor bastards. No wonder they had to come out to rob. The credit watches of more than a dozen people added up to less than 20,000 points, which was a bit too little. He couldn't be the only one robbed by them. Even if they sold the spaceship, it shouldn't be just this little money. George looked at the remaining humanoids with a gloomy face. The difference between them and the Earthlings was too big, and he couldn't really see anything. But his intuition told George that someone must have embezzled his money. No one in this world can embezzle their own money in front of him. No one. George stretched out his hand directly, and all the remaining credit devices of the humanoids flew into George's hands. Anyway, they no longer needed this thing in the barren land. George directly used the ability to control electronic items to transfer all the credit points to his watch. 100,000 credit points, although not very much, has already met George's expectations. Strictly speaking, this amount of money is not small. Many sweepers have shed their blood and sacrificed their lives. A team has fought for several years to complete a task, and it only costs tens of thousands of credit points. Considering that these humanoid creatures still have value, although George felt very angry about their behavior of deceiving him, he did not punish them. He drove them directly to a spacious room, threw some food they brought on the spacecraft, and then locked them up. Before reaching the barren land, just ensure their lives, and the rest will be on their own. George put the Alice into space, and then let the artificial intelligence wiki take control of the sweeper's spacecraft, and continue to fly to the barren land. "Master, we just passed through a space wormhole, and it will take another 30 hours to reach the barren land." Wiki reported the specific itinerary to George. The entire spaceship had already been cleaned up again by the surviving humanoid creatures ordered by George, and the traces of the previous battle had been completely erased. Whether from the outside or from the inside, this was an ordinary interstellar cargo ship. Before, Gran and his team were preparing to escort a batch of goods to the barren land for sale. It was a no man's land there, and only there could this batch of goods of unknown origin be sold at the highest price. After George ordered Wiki to take control of the entire spaceship, he also got the cosmic star map recorded on the spaceship. And this star map of this group of sweepers is not the most complete. In the entire universe, the star maps with the latest and most complete records are always those of the top forces in the universe, such as the Kree Empire, Xander, the Collective and other people and forces. The star maps in the hands of their senior officials are the most complete. They only recorded 2 relatively hidden wormhole channels, which were not recorded on Maul's spaceship. Are those Kree people crazy? They launched an attack for no reason. Do they want to become the enemy of the entire universe? George couldn't help but curse, looking at the spaceship behind him, that had turned into a ball of fire, and he still couldn't understand it. Although the Kree Empire is one of the 3 major alien empires outside the Milky Way in the known starfield, it is not the most powerful. The Kree people are fighting fiercely with the Skrulls almost every moment, so in the battle with the Milky Way Shader Federation, they had to choose to sign a peace agreement to temporarily stop fighting, so that they can concentrate on the war with the Skrulls. No one knew what was going on. Just when George's spaceship had just flown out of a space wormhole, it was immediately locked by a Kree spaceship with weapons, and they were asked to completely give up control of the spaceship and enter the spaceship for a search. Even if George was not on this spaceship, the foundation of a sweeper could not withstand the inspection of the Kree people. If it was a low-level soldier of the Nova Corps who came to inspect, he might be able to escape by bribery, but the Kree people who always had a bad impression of the people in the Milky Way would not work. So when the Kree spaceship stated their demands, George immediately ordered the spaceship to prepare for evacuation. However, the other party was still relentless. After a fierce battle between the two sides, the Kree spaceship was destroyed, while the spaceship George robbed was safe and sound. In theory, this place is close to the Barren Land, and the Kree Empire's troops should not get too close to here. This is a tacit understanding between the upper rulers. George couldn't figure out what was going on for a while, but he was sure that this spaceship must be sold as soon as it arrived in the Barren Land, and he also had to make up. Although George was not afraid of the Kree Empire, he didn't want to bring trouble to the Earth because of himself. Chapter 194, Planet Morag. Speed up. George ordered Wiki. Yes, sir. Wiki replied. Not long after, a huge skull was dragged across countless nebulae. This was the head of the only Celestial who was killed in the legend. There are at least thousands of Celestials, and the strength of the members varies greatly. The strong ones can influence the multiverse, and the weak ones are about the same as Odin. The Celestials can also be called cosmic gardeners. They often interfere with various things in the universe. For example, the Skrulls, mutants, and Eternals are all created by the Celestials by transforming the native creatures of the planet. The person who killed this Celestial member in the legend was Null, the god of symbiotes. The sword that cut off the Celestial's head was the Black Death Sword. Because the Celestial's life form is special, this head later evolved into a huge barren land. After a long time, some of the remains of the corpses still remain, becoming a great fortune. It is hard to imagine the remains of the head of the celestial god in front of us. With such a huge head, how huge his body must have been when he was in his prime, and how powerful his power must have been. In this head, there is still a huge amount of cosmic energy. This energy remains in the bone marrow, cerebrospinal fluid, etc. in the body. Even after billions of years, it still persists. It is a very precious energy resource and a continuous source of wealth. When this head of the celestial god appeared, Collector Tiwan didn't know how much effort he spent to snatch this ancient wreckage. And the minerals mined from this ancient wreckage over the past hundreds of years have brought him a continuous stream of wealth, and to some extent, also supported his collection of everything he is interested in the universe. In this asteroid-sized head, countless mining vehicles are constantly running back and forth, constantly mining carts of priceless rare minerals. The owner of the entire barren land, the Collector Tiwan, is himself a powerful elder of the universe with unfathomable power. It is rumored that Tiwan is immortal because he lost a bet with the goddess of death and will never step into the kingdom of death. Over the long years, Tiwan felt that he needed a hobby to keep his sanity, so he began to collect interesting artifacts and life forms from all over the universe. Finally, gradually, his obsession with collecting reached a certain level, and the collector began to collect things he thought were rare or precious for the sake of pure collection. George remembered that in other timelines, many superheroes were also among the collector's collections. Of course, George's goal in coming to the barren land this time was not this elder of the universe. After all, although he had some unique things on him, they were not suitable for sale to this collector, and some collections in the Marvel world would not be taken seriously by him. George's main purpose for coming here was to find information about a planet called Morag. Although George obtained the star map from Orwell, as far as George knew, Morag was located in the Xander Empire. Each empire has a different name for the planet, so George did not find his target on Orwell's star map. Moreover, George wanted to find the star map of the ancient star. As one of his lairs, he must know clearly whether there are any neighbors around. After stopping the spaceship at the airport, George got off the spaceship. He was soon attracted by the strange creatures around him. There were red, yellow, green, humanoid, stone-shaped, and jelly-transparent alien creatures of different shapes. George quickly found a middleman and disposed of the goods in his hand together with the spaceship. George, who had psychic abilities, was not worried about being deceived. He was merciful not to deceive the other party. At this time, he turned into the appearance of Gran, the original boss of the spaceship, before getting off the spaceship. After a few laps in the lively bar area, George changed back to his own appearance. There are several areas here that are prohibited for idle people to enter, but the living area can be entered at will. Although it is a lawless place, there are still certain rules and order here. The one who made all these rules and order was the owner of this place, the collector Spider-Gwen. No one could affect the normal mining work. This was the first iron rule here. As for the living area, as long as the death of the people did not affect the mining work, Spider-Gwen would not interfere. Outside a bustling hall, more than a dozen humanoid beauties with different skin colors stood at the door to solicit customers. A tall man in a miner's uniform, who had lost all his chips, was thrown out. This is the most drunken and dreamy place in the whole barren land. Here, as long as you have money, you can get everything you want. George didn't have that much money on him. After all, he just walked out of the earth, but he was very lucky that he met the most unlucky interstellar sweeper Gran. In addition, after selling the spaceship and the cargo on the spaceship, George got more than 1 million credit points. This credit point can't buy what George wants, but looking at the place where the miner was thrown out just now, George smiled. When George came out again, his credit points had increased from more than 1 million to 10 million, and this was the result of George's restraint. You know, whether it is ordinary gambling tools or electronic instruments, they are useless in front of George. As long as you choose the right way, it is a piece of cake to get some credit points without causing the dealer's disgust. In the chaotic lawless place, thieves and robbers can be seen everywhere. People like George who came out of the casino with a smug look on their faces are the best targets for them to attack. So where George walked, he often saw people screaming and falling on the street next to him. George actually had no intention of taking action, but the biological positions distributed around his body were enough for them to drink a pot. The guards here don't care about the riots at all. They have long been accustomed to this kind of situation in this area. Those unlucky people who died in the conflict were directly thrown into the depths of the universe's garbage. The continuous casualties also made those alien gangsters recognize the reality, and everyone avoided George after seeing him. You know, there are more than billions of races in the universe, but there are not many races with special abilities. Any special race is not easy to mess with, and it is better to stay away if you don't have some strength. Next, George came to the bar. At any time, the bar as a gathering place is a good place to get news. Not to mention, the barren land is full of space sweepers. As long as George is willing to spend money, he will definitely get the information he wants. Chapter 195 Groot and Raccoon. George walked into a tavern, found a secluded place, called a robot waiter, asked for a glass of alcoholic beverage, and then quietly observed the sweepers around him. Soon, George selected a trading partner, a group of Xander sweepers who hid in the barren land to avoid being wanted by the Nova Corps. The original Xander star map was no longer of much use to them, and it was naturally a pleasant surprise to exchange it for money. The Nova Corps called itself the Cosmic Police, composed of militiamen who were determined to maintain cosmic peace and various people who surveyed the universe. It radiated the entire universe with Xander as its base, which was somewhat similar to the Green Lantern Corps of DC next door. As for what George would do after obtaining the star map, it had nothing to do with them. The transaction was reached, and George did not stop. He turned around and left the bar and unknowingly returned to the vicinity of the starport. Standing at the exit of the starport, looking at the universe outside, there were spaceships leaving from time to time, and there were spaceships docking, and the port was always very lively. At this time, another spaceship docked, which attracted George's attention. It's not because the spaceship is so advanced, on the contrary, it's so broken that you can't look at it directly. This is also a small spaceship, only about 30 meters in total, and there are patches all over it. Yes, patches. Maybe it has just experienced a battle, and the whole spaceship is damaged everywhere. Some of the cracks are several inches wide. Such cracks are spread over dozens of places on the hull, just like many band-aids are put on the spaceship. It is absolutely a miracle that such a broken ship can sail in the universe and successfully enter the starport. George looked over with interest, and his extraordinary hearing heard two very interesting conversations. Groot, hey, man, we have no money anymore. We have spent all our funds to get energy for this spaceship. I'm Groot. No, not stolen. I mean I just borrowed it, and I will return it to others when I have the chance. This familiar form of conversation made George's eyes light up. Isn't this the grumpy little raccoon and the cute Groot in the future Guardians of the Galaxy? It's only the 1980s, and the two guys are already forming a group. But George is not surprised that Rocket Raccoon appears in this era. In the original plot, Rocket Raccoon once said that he would not live long. Although Rocket Raccoon is a genetically modified raccoon, its lifespan should be similar to that of an ordinary raccoon, with a lifespan of more than 30 years at most. But in fact, Rocket Raccoon comes from a lunatic asylum called Half-World abandoned by aliens. Before the aliens left, they created a large number of robots to take care of the patients in the lunatic asylum. Finally, one day a star exploded, and the radiation awakened the robots' self-awareness. Soon after, the robots got tired of working, and the aliens turned to genetic engineering to transform the patients' pets, and let these animals take care of the patients. Rocket Raccoon is one of the highly genetically and mechanically modified biochemical animal caretakers. Before leaving the half-world that created itself, Rocket Raccoon had lived for more than 300 years, and its lifespan is much longer than that of humans. Of course, the raccoon is just a genetically modified creature. Although its lifespan is long, it is not permanent. After living for hundreds of years, the raccoon has indeed entered its twilight years. It is not too far from the time of death, but it will definitely be okay to live for a few more decades. For a long time afterwards, Rocket chose to erase his memory of the half-world. Rocket, who traveled alone in the universe, met a genetically modified otter named Ms. Leela, and the two later became a pair of mandarin duck thieves. Rocket, who should have lived an exciting and romantic life for two people, was betrayed by the otter and forced to go to prison. This heartbreaking love made Rocket's heart negative to the bottom. Fortunately, not long after, Rocket met his lifelong friend Groot in prison. However, looking at the embarrassed posture of this pair of brothers in distress, it is possible that this pair of good friends has just escaped from prison. George kept his eyes on the shabby spaceship and saw Groot, who was still in the form of a big tree, and the skinny raccoon and tattered equipment, walking down from the broken spaceship, and immediately the mechanical guards of the port greeted them. Seeing the mechanical guard coming over with the electronic equipment, the little raccoon was a little mad, but he still held it back and asked, "Wow, how much does it cost to dock at the airport for a day?" 100 credit points. How much? The little raccoon almost jumped up. 100 credit points. The mechanical guard's voice did not change, but he just put his hand on the energy gun. Fuck, this broken spaceship is not even worth 5,000 credit points, and I have to pay a 100 credit points docking fee. Rocket glanced at the broken spaceship angrily. This broken spaceship was not only in tatters, but also had no fuel to continue sailing. They had to dock here. After clearing his credit points, the raccoon's hair stood up, and he was angry. Only 50 credit points, that's it. We are officially bankrupt. Groot, who was more than 3 meters tall, followed behind honestly, "I'm Groot," the mechanical guard said in the same voice. 100 credit points. Rocket said angrily, "I only have 50 points. Let me mortgage my beloved baby first, and then I will pay you the parking fee," the mechanical guard said in the same voice. 100 credit points. Groot, who was more than 3 meters tall, said, "I'm Groot. I know, I have to pay the parking fee, but we have no money." Rocket said angrily, "If you don't mind, I will help you pay it." At this time, a voice that sounded like heavenly music to Rocket, and the other sounded. Rocket, Groot and the mechanical guard all looked at George, who suddenly appeared. "Sir, do we know each other?" Rocket asked. "I don't know him, but I feel like we will know each other in the future, so let's just treat this as a good relationship," George said as he scanned the cash register and paid the parking fee for them. "Okay, don't worry, how about this? I hire you to do something for me," George said with a smile. "I'm Groot," Groot said. "Hire us?" Great, you know we are the best cosmic mercenary combination. There is no task we can't complete. But our fee is not cheap, Rocket said immediately. As a cosmic mercenary, Rocket became enthusiastic when he heard that he was going to be hired. George pointed to the bar not far away and said, "This is not a place to talk. Let's go to the bar. How about it?" "Of course, Groot. Let's go. Someone is buying us a drink." Rocket immediately carried his energy weapon and walked towards the bar. Chapter 196, Cosmic Spirit Sphere. Several people entered the tavern. George found a secluded place. Raccoon was not polite. He jumped on the seat, waved to the robot waiter, and asked for a lot of alcoholic drinks. Then he shook the glass like a big boss and asked, "Tell me, what's the deal? Let me make it clear first. Uncle Rocket is the most powerful mercenary in the universe. My brother is a rare treeman from Planet X. If you want us to help, you can't pay too little." George smiled and said, "It's not too dangerous. I mainly want you to help me find a primitive planet with beautiful scenery and rich flora and fauna. The reward is 10,000 credit points. I wonder if you two are interested." Raccoon drank a glass of alcoholic drink and said, 10,000 credit points is not enough to get the planet you want. I want a planet that is a little remote, and the size doesn't matter. I'll pay 5,000 credit points first, and I'll pay another 5,000 credit points after you find it. George said, "No problem. It's very simple for us brothers. Just find a remote planet." "Right, brother." Raccoon winked at Groot and said, "I'm Groot." Groot said after drinking a glass of wine. "Well, happy cooperation." George held out his glass and clinked it with Groot and the raccoon. "Happy cooperation. I'm Groot." After transferring credit points, adding the raccoon as a friend, and paying for the wine, George left the brothers. George actually knew that the money he spent before was basically a waste. It would be harder to get this pair of unreliable brothers to complete the task obediently than to kill them. They always complicate ordinary tasks. Of course, as George said before, this money is just a bond with them. Anyway, this little money is nothing in George's eyes. Half a month later, George drove the Alice and bypassed the Xander people's sphere of influence and entered the outermost edge of the Andromeda Nebula. After sailing for a day, he landed on a desolate planet. The star map of the sweeper only helped George roughly lock a range. After hundreds of years, the name of the planet has long changed. The planet was covered with gravel, and there was no trace of life on the entire planet. Even the entire mantle was in a very unstable state. Strong earthquakes occurred from time to time, and the ground was covered with deep gullies. It didn't look like the planet where Star-Lord later found the power gem. George used his supervision to search it. Although he found some traces of intelligent life after a careful search, it was a long time ago, and it was impossible to directly determine the detailed information of that year. However, this was not difficult for George. He directly activated the time magic he learned from the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and the scene of that year appeared in front of George little by little. He quickly skipped over the changes of this planet over hundreds of years until a picture of men, women, old and young kneeling down to worship the cosmic spirit bull and then migrating with a dilapidated spaceship appeared. Because too much time had passed, the picture was not clear, but from the hollow surface of the silver metal ball and the faint purple light inside, George could be sure that it was the one he was looking for. It was really not easy. George deduced it bit by bit, based on the star map provided by the sweeper. Finally, he found some information from the past on this planet. Although he had not found the cosmic spirit ball yet, George believed that he was getting close. After studying their direction of navigation, George did not drive the spaceship, but retracted it and rushed out of the planet like a sharp arrow. Soon, George found new traces on another planet. Like an excellent hunter, he kept looking for the movement trajectory of the gang among the clues. To be honest, George admired Star-Lord a little bit. He really didn't know how he found the cosmic spirit ball at that time. Landing on a desolate planet again, the location at this time had already penetrated deep into the Andromeda Nebula. George used supervision to look around. The pale red aurora kept flickering on the sky, and the spots were like countless red fireflies shining together. Supervision kept searching, and finally found it in a valley. Now it can't even be called a wreckage, but can only be said to be a piece of scrap metal similar to a spaceship. Not seeing any buildings built by intelligent life recently, George used time magic again, and then found his target behind a valley. George looked at the tall temple lying in the underground cave with joy, and a smile from the heart appeared on his face. There are 9 round columns on the front of the temple, which looks a bit like the temple of the Olympian gods. The architectural style is very grand, but it looks like it has been abandoned for a long time. He strode into the temple. Even though it was extremely dilapidated, he could still see its former grandeur. He used his supervision to directly see the target behind a metal door. There was a combination lock on the metal door. George was too lazy to guess it. He sprayed his freezing breath on the door and kicked it open. As the door turned into ice crystals, George also walked into the secret room inside the temple. The equipment on the shrine was still running, and the anti-gravity made the cosmic spirit ball float in an electromagnetic field. Come to me. George controlled the absorption of gravity and directly sucked the cosmic spirit ball into the palm of his hand. George was very calm about taking this ownerless object. In fact, he didn't mind, even if it had an owner. How could it be called robbery to rob aliens? Touching the smooth and artistic metal creation, George threw it up and caught it, playing with it for a while. Although the process was a bit tortuous, he finally got the cosmic spirit sphere. Although this planet is already very dilapidated, the atmospheric circulation system of the entire planet is still well preserved. This is proved by the fact that Star-Lord and Rhodes, who came here to get the cosmic spirit sphere in Avengers 4, opened their masks here. So if you are willing to spend a lot of effort to repair and transform, Morag can still become a planet suitable for human habitation. However, the resources on this planet have been basically consumed by the destroyed civilization, and it is not worth spending so much effort. This is probably the reason why the Zenda people have been abandoning this planet. If it still has a little value, the cosmic spirit sphere would not have been discovered all the time. This unknown race once used the cosmic spirit sphere to extract the energy of the internal power gem for their own use. This method must have been lost, and George is not rare to use it. George didn't care about the fact that thousands of people had to gather together to use the power stone. Ronan, the super Kree, could use it with his bare hands. His physique was stronger than Ronan's, so there was no problem. But holding the power stone in his hand and using it directly was too unclassy, and George would not choose this. George would get more infinity stones in the future, and George was not going to use the power stone directly. So for the time being, just let it stay in the cosmic spirit ball. This cosmic spirit ball could prevent the energy of the power stone from leaking out, and it was also a good treasure in itself. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197 Power Gem. Although the cosmic spirit ball is not ordinary, what really attracts George is the power gem hidden inside. This planet is extremely desolate and not a major transportation route, so it is undoubtedly a very good choice to experiment with the power gem here. However, George took a look at the already very dilapidated temple and stopped the idea of taking out the power gem immediately. After carefully observing the cosmic spirit ball in his hand, George took out a small piece of Amazon metal from the space and then saw that the Amazon metal quickly turned into the appearance of the cosmic spirit ball. After George engraved some sealing magic in it, it can be said that the cosmic spirit ball made by George is definitely not inferior to the original cosmic spirit ball in terms of hiding the breath. George controlled gravity and put the cosmic spirit ball he made back to its original place, letting it float in its original place, and everything in the secret room returned to its original state. As for the damaged metal door, it has completely turned into metal slag and has no value for restoration. George glanced at it and ignored it. That's it for the time being. Although I don't know if Star-Lord will come here again to look for the cosmic spirit ball in the future. George has left him something as compensation. Since he was looking for the cosmic spirit ball, then I'll give him one back. George teleported to the other side of the planet, then twisted the cosmic spirit ball clockwise, and a purple light shone out. George didn't have the infinite gauntlet equipment like Thanos, so he could only try it himself first. Ordinary life forms in this universe can't withstand the energy in it, but is George an ordinary life form? Obviously not. Countless purple energy gas masses were quickly ejected in all directions in a curve. Fortunately, George found a deserted place. If it was in the original hall, it would definitely be torn to pieces by the energy impact. At this time, George's body and soul were firmly attracted by the power gem. With George's physical strength, it was a bit difficult to directly control the power. There was some energy accumulation in the palm of his hand, and the originally smooth back of his hand had cracks of varying lengths, but then they were repaired by self-healing power. In this way, George's physical fitness is not as good as fairness for the time being, but it is not much worse, but it is no problem to use the power gem for a short time. The pure power to the extreme is just the ability attached to the power gem. The real value of the power gem lies in the rich knowledge contained in it. The basic operating principles of the universe are transmitted to George all the time. The user of the power gem can copy all physical superpowers. George originally had a lot of abilities. Now with the help of the power gem, his abilities have reached a new level. Under the premise of holding the power gem, George manipulated the 4 basic forces, just like Magneto and Lorna used magnetism, completely out of instinct, and the power has also been improved. There are too many physical abilities in the universe, so many that George can only read some of the parts he can understand, and the rest he can't understand. After all, the development of physics on Earth is still too shallow. Boom. With a bang, George controlled the energy and laid a purple energy on his fist. A light punch created a very huge deep pit on the ground. Raising his right hand lightly, the purple energy gas overflowing from the palm of his hand became less and less. George continued to use his own power to communicate with the power gem. While absorbing the knowledge and abilities in it, George also wanted to put his own mark in the power gem. Just like Zhu Wenwu had a deep mark with the 10 rings in his continuous use, George also wanted to completely control this gem. For the time being, George has other uses for this gemstone, and it cannot be directly swallowed by the space, otherwise there would be no need for such trouble. George's behavior of marking it was not because he was worried that the power gemstone would be lost or stolen, but because of the exclusive psychology of the traverser. Unfortunately, the power gemstone has no emotional feedback, but only passively transmits knowledge. And no matter how hard George tries, some purple energy will always leak out. Of course, it is not as big as the explosion caused by the maid of the collector D1, but it will automatically spray energy gas into the surrounding area. This shows that George cannot completely control the power gemstone by his body, and he is still a step behind. And it is not convenient to hold it directly in the hand during the battle. Looking at the power gemstone in his hand, George sighed and said to himself, "Forget it, I'll consider making a suitable container when I go back." The cosmic spirit ball reappeared, and George put the purple power gemstone in his hand back into the cosmic spirit ball, then screwed it again and sealed it. George shook the cosmic spirit ball in his hand up and down, and found that there was no change, so he took it back to the chaotic space. As for carrying it with him, forget it. Most of the prominent guys in the universe know what the cosmic orb means. George can't guarantee whether they will take the opportunity to snatch it if they see him walking around with the cosmic orb. Although the power stone has no meaning for the real bosses in the universe, there are still many people in the universe who pursue power. Although George is not afraid, there is no need to attract trouble, right? As for why Thanos is not worried, it is because Death, one of the 5 gods, is standing behind him. He is still eager for someone to kill him to see Death, but if Death doesn't let him die, he can't die. Moreover, the gems have a clustering effect. There are already Space Stone and Time Stone on Earth. What if the Ancient One doesn't want the gems to gather in advance, because the time has not come, and wants to send the Power Stone away after knowing that he has the Power Stone? Although, in terms of force, George is no longer afraid of the Ancient One, but as a boss who has lived for many years, who knows how many cards he still has in his hand. So there is no need to provoke her when she wants to retire. Anyway, if George wants to obtain the knowledge in the Power Stone, he can also hide in the chaotic space and absorb it slowly. And you have to know that there is another God King Odin on Earth who is observing. Who knows what his attitude is towards the Power Stone. Therefore, after repeated consideration, it is better to put the cosmic spirit orb into space now. There is no opponent who is too strong to use the power stone. There is no need to keep the cosmic spirit orb in the open at all times. After putting away the cosmic spirit orb, George took out the Alice spacecraft, set the route back to Earth, and went straight back to the room to rest. The process of searching for the cosmic spirit orb in the past 2 days was indeed too much trouble. It would be more appropriate for me to go back to Earth and wait for the plot to begin, and then directly snatch the other gems after they are brought to Earth. In addition to the power stone, which is relatively easy to get, the other gems, except the space stone, are not so easy to find. There is still one chapter left. Please give me a monthly ticket and recommend. Chapter 198, Return to Earth. I won't talk about the space stone, as George can get it anytime he wants. The time stone is still in the hands of Ancient One at this time, so he can plan it. Even if he fails, he can get it directly from Thanos. The ether, also known as the reality stone, is still sealed somewhere in Svartalfheim by Odin's father. The 9 realms are not connected yet, and I believe Odin will not want anyone to collect the stones, so the method of borrowing from Asgard to find the reality stone is not feasible. However, this stone will be absorbed into the body of Thor's girlfriend on Earth in the original timeline. At that time, as long as he arranges in advance, it will not be difficult to get it. I don't know whether the Mind Stone has fallen into Thanos' hands or is still in Larespek's hands, and he can only wait for the 3 princesses to take the initiative to bring it to Earth in the future. The last Soul Stone, although George knows that this stone is on the mysterious planet Vormir, it needs to be exchanged with the soul of the person he loves, and George can't sacrifice Alice to exchange it. Since Thanos has trained Gamora for 20 years for that day, why should he do this? Why not just wait for him to come to him directly? Not to mention that it is not the right time yet. George does not even know where the planet Vormir is. Whether it is from the Kree Empire database obtained by Marvel or the star map traded with the group of sweepers, George has not found any relevant records of this planet. Even in the original plot, Gamora accidentally discovered this planet during the mission, and the location of this planet was still a mystery before that. And at this point in time, Gamora may not have been born yet. Even if Gamora has been born, George will not take the initiative to contact her. After all, George still needs her to follow Thanos like in the original plot, and then perform the mission and discover the planet Vormir. While George was daydreaming, the spacecraft had already flown out of this desolate planet. But before going back, he still had to bring some gifts to his family. After all, this was his first time leaving the Earth, and it was really not right not to bring gifts back to his wife. Although he was not familiar with this starfield, the star map he bought before came in handy. The several prosperous commercial planets marked above can fully meet George's shopping needs. Since George is not short of money, he bought a lot of various specialties sold on commercial planets all over the universe. Coincidentally, George bought a star map of the ancient star area in a store that specializes in selling star maps. According to the star map, that area is at the edge of the Milky Way and is also at the edge of the Kree Empire. You know, although the Kree, Shia, and Skrull are known as the 3 major empires in the universe, this title is actually limited to the starfield with the Milky Way and Andromeda Galaxy as the core, with a range of tens of millions of light years. But this area, let alone the entire universe, even for the observable universe, this is only a very small part. There are more powerful civilizations outside this area, which is also a recognized fact. Because of the problem of space navigation technology, there are not many contacts with civilizations outside this area. Just like the buffer zone left by 2 major powers, the galaxy of the ancient star owned by George is such a no man's land. After buying the required star map, George left here with satisfaction. The next journey was very smooth, and he returned to Earth smoothly a month later. After giving the gifts he brought back to everyone, George spent a few days with Alice before he went back to work. The main reason was that George felt that he still had too few men, and it would be too troublesome to rely on cloning. However, the unifying power of the mother box provided George with a better choice. Moreover, the super large battleship technology contained in the mother box also gave George more choices, and he was also very excited to extract several technological drawings recently. You know, Thanos' temple is a super large spaceship, and the original battleship is not advantageous in size. Out of stamp collecting, George doesn't mind building more large battleships. After George dealt with things in the Marvel world, he returned to the ancient star again. This time, after knowing the location of the wormhole, George was relieved, after arranging defense forces in key areas. Then he brought a fast attack ship equipped with artificial intelligence wiki and 5,000 NS5 robots in space. Of course, George also brought some weapons and ammunition. In terms of food, clothing, housing and transportation, George prepared a large amount of high-energy chocolate, canned lunch and meat, etc. Planet of the Apes plot. In the future, the Earth can no longer support such a large population, so it is necessary to go to the universe to find other habitable planets. On the way to find a suitable planet, humans began to train orangutans to complete some simple tasks instead of humans. During a flight mission, the spacecraft driven by the orangutan of astronaut Leo encountered a cosmic storm and lost contact with the space station. In order to rescue his partner, Leo drove the spacecraft to the center of the storm alone despite the obstruction. However, the spacecraft eventually crashed on a strange planet. Leo, who had just escaped from danger, was captured by a group of vicious apes as soon as he walked out of the cabin. Fortunately, with the help of a radical female orangutan, Ellie, who advocated human rights, Leo temporarily escaped from the clutches of the apes and hid. Ellie is the daughter of a senior official in the Ape Society. She firmly believes that humans and apes can live in harmony, so she strongly advocates human liberation. When she saw Leo for the first time, Xiao Chengwen was moved by his calmness, courage, and perseverance and became his loyal ally. In addition to Ellie, Leo met two more human rebels, Diana and Lin Bao. Diana is a very beautiful human rebel. Her wild and unruly personality and beautiful face made the ape general who specializes in suppressing human resistance fall in love with her. Lin Bao is a black market merchant who sells human slaves. Although he is very loyal to the ape government, he is still discriminated against by the apes. Because of his love for prison, he also joined the rebels. Under the leadership of Leo, the four fighters who fight for human rights began to fight with the leader of the ape army, Seed, and General Atta. Leo and his team not only have to survive Seed's pursuit, but also have to wait for an opportunity to break into the restricted area of the ape planet to uncover a major secret about human history. This will determine the future of all mankind. The war for the planet of the apes plane is generally a low-risk science fiction plane, which is the future after rise of the planet of the apes. Apart from the planet itself, and the group of intelligent apes on it, George did not care about other valuable items such as spaceships, small space cruisers and orbital electromagnetic guns. Chapter 199 Flagship. George suddenly appeared in the unknown tropical forest of the ape planet. He raised his hand to release the fast attack ship, entered the spaceship, and then ordered Wiki, release the carrier-based aircraft to scan this planet. Okay, sir. Then dozens of carrier-based aircraft began to scatter under the control of the NS5 robot. At this time, only a small white space cruiser with thick white smoke fell from the atmosphere in the sky, and in George's eyes, it fell into a lake not far away. Leo, a pilot of the US Air Force, originally wanted to save his gorilla, but after the gorilla disappeared in the center of the cosmic storm, Leo, as the owner, ignored the obstruction and drove the spaceship alone to find his gorilla. Then there was an interstellar travel in the center of the cosmic storm. It was also because of him that the gorilla became the overlord of the planet. George did not go to rescue immediately. Anyway, the protagonist would not die, and it didn't matter if it was early or late. 4 hours later, all the terrain on the planet was displayed on the projection. Wiki, control the NS5 robot and gather all the humans on this planet. George ordered again. This time, not only carrier-based aircraft, but also a large number of transport ships flew out under the control of robots. The technology on this planet is still very backward. Under thermal energy scanning, all humans were gathered together in just a few hours. In fact, there are less than 30,000 humans in total. George asked Wiki to distribute the canned food and tents he brought. At first, this group of humans were found and captured by robots from various hiding corners. They were still a little scared, but they soon calmed down after finding that these robots distributed food and shelter. In the process of gathering humans, Wiki inevitably clashed with the gorillas on this planet, but after the gorillas developed stronger firepower on this side, they chose to give in. But everything was useless. After Wiki gathered the humans, George came to the land from the fast attack ship. George used the unified power of the mother box, and his hands emitted endless flames, and began to purify the planet. One day later, the whole planet became devastated. The originally beautiful planet turned into a grey-black color, and countless animals and plants lost their lives in the fire. In the corners, that George didn't see, countless apes who escaped the fire mutated into apocalypse demons. George could feel that there were countless lives on this planet that were connected to him. Just a thought, countless apocalypse demons scattered on this planet all flapped their wings and flew towards their masters. On the other side, the humans who had been watching all this happen on a high mountain regarded George, who was suspended in the air, as a god, because only gods could do everything that happened before their eyes. The earth changed color with a wave of his hand. At this moment, all humans prostrated themselves on the ground, constantly praying to the gods in the air. Even Leo, the pilot who fell into the time storm and came to this planet, was shaken in his cognition and knelt on the ground with everyone. 10 years later, the planet of the apes had already been hollowed out. All the useful metals on this planet were processed in the mechanical factory controlled by Wiki in the past 10 years and turned into parts. The final result is the huge ship in front of George, the mantle of the world. George looked at the basic information on the projection screen. Length: 142.7 kilometers. Width: 138.6 kilometers. Height: 371.4 kilometers. Tonnage: 4.7 gigatons equals 4.7 billion tons. Hull material: programmable composite real light material and its energy connector. Real light is also called hard light, which means materialized light. Just like Asgard's rainbow bridge is also made of energy light. This material can change its form and even the characteristics of the material itself at will according to the set program, which allows the hull to quickly repair itself and change its characteristics according to the type of damage it will suffer. Special devices: stealth system, which is invisible for radar, visible light and gravitational wave motion detection. That is, it can allow such a giant to hide on people's heads without being discovered. Torsion field, which can forcibly pull some small ships, such as the fast attack ship originally built by George. Energy barrier, which can defend against weapon attacks. The core seed, the core part of the warship, can be evacuated by a single jump. As long as the core seed exists, the mantle of the world can be quickly evacuated and rebuilt. Armament: Recombiner 1 heavy iron weapon system, 1 stasis tension drive, 40 deflection force field drive arrays, 1700 light volley guns, 25,000 focus beam cannons, large particle cannon network, composed of a large number of Z-8250 heavy/light real light directed energy cannons. There are hundreds of millions of units. Once damaged, the processing plant in the warship will immediately replenish them. 100,000 fast attack fighters. It's so big. This is George's first reaction after seeing the whole machine. The length and width are 140 kilometers, and the height is 370 kilometers. This is a giant flying vertically. I like it. The more I look at it, the more satisfied I am. But when George finished reading the introduction of the Recombiner, linen was sweating on his forehead. Doomsday weapon. Inhumane ethnic cleansing weapon. This is George's evaluation of the Recombiner. The Recombiner, although the name is ordinary, the effect is extremely terrifying. It can extract the consciousness and memory of organisms into a digital state and force people to become AI. It can also decompose, tamper with, and rewrite personality at will. In the words of idealism, it sucks your soul away, and not only sucks it away, but also plays with it at will. Recombiner. This is simply recombining people's souls. These absorbed consciousnesses will be processed and then installed in the bodies of warriors, becoming warriors of the mantle of the world, or warriors who are infinitely resurrected. Originally, George traveled to this plane specifically for manpower issues, using the power of unity to transform millions of apocalypse demons. Before the construction of this spaceship, George only saw its huge size and terrifying firepower. Unexpectedly, the recombiner that he didn't care about gave him the biggest surprise. It's no exaggeration to say that with just this battleship, George can establish a superpower that is no less than the three major empires. Unfortunately, George only obtained the construction data of the mantle of the world spaceship and no data on Prometheus warriors. But it doesn't matter, George still has the Apocalypse Demon, a race that is not inferior to any warrior. George input Apocalypse's DNA information into the cloning data of the spacecraft, and the spacecraft can automatically clone Apocalypse as needed. You know, this spacecraft is known to have a standing army of 1 billion Promethean bodies. And once these bodies are damaged, they will be reborn on the battleship. Now it is the same with Apocalypse. This is simply a private customized super flagship. It has almost perfect ship-to-ship firepower, ship-to-air capability, ship-to-ground firepower, shield protection capability and hull self-adjustment and repair capabilities. Even if the main body is destroyed, it can quickly make a comeback. And most importantly, it can run perfectly under Wiki's control. This is George's ideal flagship. There is one more chapter. Please vote for the monthly ticket. Please recommend. And please collect. Chapter 200 Crushing. Unfortunately, the resources of this planet are not too rich. Just building this ship consumed the resources of the entire planet. After returning to the real world, George first lived quietly on Earth for a while. After all, a year has passed in reality, and the clone has also conveyed a lot of news. One thing worth George's attention is that Clinton Francis Barton, who grew up on the island, has grown up and started to receive individual training from Buggy. In addition, with the assistance of the inner armor containing vibranium and the exoskeleton armor, Buggy's metal left arm has become relatively useless. Finally, with the help of Dr. Erskine, Buggy successfully transplanted the cloned arm and is in the recovery period. In addition, George also discovered that the Red House of the Bear Empire sent this generation of Black Widow to obtain incomplete engine information from the Pegasus laboratory in the United States and prepared to build a suspended space base. Of course, this plan has not yet been implemented. In George's view, it is just the level of Anchor Fortress in Naruto, and naturally it is not taken seriously by George. Time came to 1984, and Ego had already returned to the universe. The hybrid Peter he left behind on Earth is 3 years old this year. Although he has no father since childhood, he has grown up healthily under the careful care of his mother Meredith Quill. This year, an important newborn was born in the Bears, but considering that there is too little information about Natasha, George decided not to interfere with her development for the time being. In a few years, when it is the 1990s, let Bucky directly join the Red Room as an instructor and train the Black Widow there. In the past few years, S.H.I.E.L.D. has also undergone great changes, and some familiar figures have begun to make their own voices in S.H.I.E.L.D. For example, Pierce, the future director of Hydra, and Hank Pym, who has completed the Ant Controller, have both made their mark in S.H.I.E.L.D. However, as before, a clone was separated to handle these chores, and the main body has returned to the Ancient Star to deal with the new emergency. The story started 3 days ago. George was teaching Alice some powerful magic, and there was an alarm from Wiki. It turned out that the wormhole on the Ancient Star had reacted. If nothing unexpected happened, a strange spaceship would pass through the wormhole and come to this starfield. Although the space base and the defense base on the satellite can be hidden by stealth equipment, the changes on the Ancient Star and the two satellites cannot be concealed. So, after George explained to Alice, he appeared in the Nemesis space base. Under the control of Wiki, the mantle of the world has been heading towards the wormhole according to the rehearsal plan. It sounds slow, but in fact, it took only a few seconds from the survey of the wormhole to the survey of the wormhole changes to George's transmission. Then George saw a cruiser from the Kree Empire that had just passed through the wormhole on the screen in the control room of the Nemesis space base. This cruiser is the same as the warship of Marwell, both of which are standard cruisers of the Kree Empire. George didn't know whether this Kree Empire spaceship was just carrying out an ordinary cruise mission or discovered something and came to this area on purpose. George didn't want to gamble, and soon a complete plan was formulated. You have to know that Darkseid, who dominates countless universes, has no shortage of opportunities for space battles. So George, who has the memory of the mother box, is no novice in space battles. First, after the Kree Empire spaceship flew away from the space jump point, George immediately dispatched 3 fast attack warships to block the wormhole. Then he arranged for the Mantle to approach the Kree Empire spaceship in stealth, and when the distance was close, he opened a large-scale starfield communication blocking device. Then the Kree Empire cruiser saw a super large space battleship suddenly appear on their route. Damn, what's going on? How could such a large super battleship appear here? The Kree spaceship commander, who was annoyed by the alarm, asked angrily. Without the report from his subordinates, they knew that they had encountered a tough guy this time. Being able to get so close at this distance without their alarm system responding, as long as the other party wanted, they could completely turn their spaceship into cosmic dust while they were not paying attention. But in his memory, he had never seen such a large spaceship. The commander, who was both shocked and angry, ordered the weapon system to be shut down while trying to contact the other side. He also asked his men to send out a distress signal immediately, hoping to successfully overcome this crisis. This is not because the commander was scared. After all, the two sides were not at the same energy level in terms of size. If the other side misunderstood because of his weapon system and fired a shot directly at him, he would not even have a chance to cry. Looking at the muzzles of the other side's weapons displayed on the detector, the number alone made all the Kree people who saw it sweat coldly. This number was just like a hedgehog, too exaggerated. What the Kree commander couldn't understand was that he was just performing a routine patrol. Isn't this area a deserted starfield? How could he encounter such a terrifying existence? Have you contacted the rescue? Is there any of our fleets nearby? The helpless commander could only hope that there were other Kree fleets patrolling the surrounding area at the moment. Otherwise, this time it is estimated that there is no escape. Sir, our communication has been cut off, the distress signal cannot be transmitted, and the contact with the Supreme Wisdom has been interrupted. In response to the commander's question, the spacecraft communication soldier gave an expected answer. From the size and firepower of the other warship, it can be seen that the other party must be from a super large force, so there must be no lack of cutting-edge technology such as communication blocking devices for large-scale starfields. Who is the other party? Sometimes, compared with the powerful enemy in front of you, the unknown enemy is the most frightening. But which force does the other party belong to? Nova Corps? Impossible. This generation is not the other party's activity area. The Shire Empire is even more impossible. The Dark Legion of the Mad Titan Thanos, but judging from its appearance, it is not any ship in the record. One imaginary enemy after another kept emerging in the mind of the commander of the Kree Empire. Just when he was thinking more and more, and couldn't think of anything, a strong light flashed across the silent starry sky. Sir, we have been captured by the other party and can't leave. The driver on the bridge suddenly reported. Turn the direction of the spacecraft quickly, and break free with all your strength. The Kree commander stood up and ordered loudly. Sir, we have lost all power. The driver replied. At this moment, all the lights in the bridge were turned off, and only a few emergency lights were still flashing. The commander could only watch helplessly as his spaceship was captured and swallowed by the enemy's warship, and an unknown fate was waiting for him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.